What's up, folks? For once, I think I actually got everything going properly right away. I never do that. Normally the microphone's broken or my webcam isn't quite working right. I think, given how my OBS is looking at the bottom, I think everything turned out okay. Hold that thought. Let me know if you guys in the chat are around and can tell me. But I think everything sounds alright. It certainly looks alright on my end. So I'm checking YouTube now, but I think we're good to go. Vibes. Hi Katie, good to see you. Yes, we can see you. Professional. I'm never professional, Katie. I'm normally like 10-15 minutes late to my own show half the time. If you're in the Motorsport 101 Discord, I'll tell you for free, we never record on time. like we'll sit down for 7 PM and it's actually about 8:30 by the time we actually start recording the show. It's quite funny. But I'm just gonna get the word out on social media real quick. Got it first time. Friday night, I'm hanging out on YouTube. What social life do I have? None is the answer to that question. Well, I did distract you with Arca Weekly this week. You did. In all fairness, you definitely did, Zoe. There is no argument on that one. But, yeah. Just get it on the M101 Twitter account as well. Now I'm on live stream, I can't type properly. I've had like 4 different typos here. Cool. Let me know how you guys are doing. Say hi and all that if you're in the chat. But you can get it on Facebook as well. Because why not? It's already on Instagram as well. You can follow me on there at Harrison101 if you're that curious to see me in various football shirts on a regular basis. But I hope you guys are doing cool. Friday night and all that. But, yeah, I hope you guys are having a good one. If you've got any cool weekend plans, do let me know. Starting to get there. First light, that's always cool. 5 of you in it. Cool. Bit early and all that. I mean, to be fair, it's normally around 7 or 8 PM. Oh, hi, Daniel. Good to see you, man. Hope you're doing alright. M101 promotion on the other screen. Love to see it. That's what I normally do when I record a podcast these days because, like, the way my bedroom is structured, like, and the fact that my webcam is quite wide, like, it's a good, God, from here to here is like 5 feet or so. Like, I end up getting stuck. So it's just like, I kind of can't not have the TV in my shot unless I rearrange the bedroom, and I can't really be bothered to do that. So, this is the best I'm going to get. But, yeah, you know, I thought I'd have that up there. Normally, I'd have the cricket on right now, but unfortunately, I don't want to risk getting copyright struck by Sky. So it's probably for the best that I don't. But yeah, so I hope you guys are having a good one. I hope you guys are doing alright and all of that. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Marlene. Good evening. Nice to see you. Thai Pizza Lord, hello sir. Yes, another hangout. Good to see you too. Fun Orb, hello. Good to see you. Okay, these I need to get some uni work done this weekend. I'm going to spend the evening listening to you talk and doing some Sims builds. You know, I've said it many times before, but it is actually the coolest compliment in the world that people actually people. Some people take like being background noise as an insult, and I love it. I think because we all lead such busy lives these days, and if you are cool enough to be a background soundtrack, then that's awesome as far as I'm concerned, because I do that all the time at work. And you know, when you're by yourself in a bookies for hours at a time, and you do get bored of all the sports on the TV every once in a while. And that's weird for even me to say, but you do get bored every once in a while. And yeah, having that as a soundtrack is pretty damn neat, if I do say so myself. Yeah, I hope the work's going all right, Katie, and all that. You know, if I am vibes, then that is fantastic as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, just checking. So hi Zoe, good to see you as well. Yeah, I said Arca Weekly was definitely a distraction. If you haven't subscribed to them already, subscribe to Team I5G. I don't know who, I think it was RJ or Zoe or someone in my Discord server that pointed out the best and the worst of Arca in iRacing, and watching the Americans go around in circles and the exploits that come with that is very, very entertaining. Do check it out if you haven't already. Definitely well worth a subscription. Checking the chat. Hi Dre. Hi Shivam. Good to see you. Hi Dre. Quiet day in the sports world today. Yeah, very quiet. I don't know why I'm even doing this. It's like I didn't time this one at all well, did I? Clearly. We're in double digits now, that's cool. Yeah, I didn't think this was going to be as busy as, like, the last time I did this, because, like, don't get me wrong, we had record-breaking numbers for what we got during the show, but I think a lot of that was because it was the day after a Grand Prix. I don't normally get Monday evenings off at work, so because I've got to do figures at work on that day and work out the business plan and all of that. So I normally close on a Monday night. So I just had a Monday night off, and I just took advantage. I was like, okay, this is a heated Grand Prix after Britain. Let's sit down and talk about it, you know. And 70 plus of you showed up to watch it. I was shocked. I say it all the time, but I really should try and do these more often, because sometimes I think you guys seem to genuinely really enjoy it, but I also don't want to burn people out when it comes to question asking. So, you know, I've got to try and get the balance right. I'm going to try and aim for like once a month. Maybe once every couple of weeks at the most. But it is something that I do genuinely like doing. I like sitting down and talking to people, especially on here, because, like, Twitter is, well, the more it goes on and the longer it evolves and exists, Twitter, you find out, is just... Twitter's great for news. Twitter is great for instant reactions. Twitter is not good for discussions and nuance and actually being able to thrash out full points over 280 characters. It's just not the right place for it. And a lot of people take Twitter way too goddamn seriously, like there's some sort of cult of personality. So... But that's not me at all. But point is that it's not the right platform, I think, for nuanced discussion. You know, I completely agree that views. Hi, good to see you, buddy. That it is getting worse and worse as years go by. I've been on the platform for 12 years now. My first account was in 2009. And it's gotten, and as more and more people use it, the worse and worse it gets, in my opinion. Like, if you know, it's Troll City at this point, because there's no repercussions for anything you say on that platform. It's got cult followings, it's got circle jerking fraternities, it's got, in F1's context, it's got people that are way too goddamn defensive over their favourite driver. when most drivers have not sinned in the eyes of 2021 social media standards. You know, Daniel, you're right. A lot of it is dependent on who you follow, but unfortunately, if you put something stupid out there, which a lot of the time is just that, it's just a stupid tweet and nothing more, you will get piled on by hundreds of people. I did it with that guy, the F1 chef guy. I had to go at Quadrant's account yesterday, and he had to private his account, and I understand why, and I feel a bit bad looking back on it now because I'm adding to the pile-on. It's kind of an inevitable part of Twitter at this point, and it's just grown as the site's gotten bigger, you know. So it's definitely not the place for those sorts of. Because I used to do it all the time. If anyone's followed me on Twitter for a long time, like 5-6 years, I used to have a lot more discussions on the platform about sports and about Formula 1 in particular. You may have noticed I don't do that as much on Twitter anymore because it gets incredibly annoying. Like like that site when it comes to nuanced discussion is struggling, and this is coming from a guy that only has 5,000 followers. I don't have that many in the grand scheme of things. I know I've got more than most, but there are guys like, I don't know how people like some of the bigger influencers cope when they've got their audiences that are 5 or 6 times the size of mine easily. So I wouldn't know where to go on that one. That's gonna be rough to say the least. But yeah, you know, you try and make the most of it. Isaiah, good to see you. Hi Kelly, good to see you. I'm just catching up on the chat a little bit here. Daniel, I think you're right. I think a lot of it does boil down to the accounts you follow, but the problem is with Twitter is that if you do that, people will accuse you of having an echo chamber. And that's also annoying because I think that argument is bullshit. It's your account. You do what you want with it, within reason, you know. If you want only a like-minded set of people to follow, that's your right. At the end of the day, that's your account, and who am I to tell you how to do it, you know? So, what can I tell you? Oh god, yeah, the copy pastors are the fucking worst. You see the same shit, like, oh, Fraudulton, or Verstappen's a fraud, or Leclerc's a fraud, and they're just doing it to get attention on the coattails of the really popular account's tweets, and it's stupid. It is so stupid. I don't know why people fucking do it. Go outside, touch some grass. Honestly, like, I don't get it at all, personally. Matt Ludham, it took F1 Twitter only about a year to catch up with football Twitter in terms of BS. No, I completely agree, Matt. I've always said that Formula 1 Twitter is football Twitter only a year behind. Like, it's not quite gotten to football Twitter standards just yet. I still see football. Also, me being a football fan, I mean, kind of goes without saying. Like, I still follow a bunch of football accounts, and it's even worse on their platform still. But Formula 1 is not far behind when it comes to how the sport is discussed on that platform. I think it's only, I said it before, I think it's only ever about a year behind. And juggling that can often be quite tricky, to say the least. I try to avoid it from Twitter as possible, except for the YouTubers. Yeah, completely understandable, Nick. I wouldn't blame you for that. The bigger players tend to be fine, but it's the ones that are trying to get attention off the bigger ones that seem to be the problem most of the time. Dom, good to see you. Ready for the Darren Stevens masterclass? I might put it on the second screen I've got on my setup over here, just to keep me busy. Because I know Kent are playing. I think it's is it Warwickshire? Is it Birmingham? It's Birmingham in the Blast tonight, and Darren Stevens is still out here doing the Lord's work in his mid-40s. What a man. But I know Zach Crawley just got dismissed by Chris Wokes. Wokes being healthy means he's probably going to get back in the England team for the 4th test, so that'll be fun. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Checking the chat. Charlie Hydre has a new scooter. Scooter's good. I mean, it's probably not the best for London pavements because they're very bumpy, they're full of cracks, they're very busy in that sense. It's not the best, and it's probably recommended you don't ride them on a road because they're not really fast enough to keep up with moving traffic. And again, that in itself is probably for the best because, for those guys who don't know, e-scooters in the UK, or in the EU in general, are locked at 15.5 miles an hour, 25 kilometers an hour. So you can't really use it on a road because most cars are traveling at more than that, so it's kind of inherently dangerous if you're going slow unless you're in cycle lanes or bus lanes without a bus, you know. Because I've already had to fix it once for a puncture, which wasn't ideal, but they put some resin in it which you know, self-repairs any puncture, so it should be fine. But I liked that, I love it, I love using it, and it's way better for me than getting the bus because it just saves me money in the long run. And yeah, where I live, Charlie, there's not a lot of bike lanes. There's a bus lane on one side on the way into work, which again is risky because there's buses that run in it, and you don't really want to ride a scooter on the road because the pavement curbs are really high. So if you have to get out of the way in an emergency or something like that, you might struggle to. It's not like a bike where you can lift the wheel up and have a wheelie and put it on the pavement that way. It's a bit more dangerous, so you're better off on the pavement, to be honest. But, yeah, there's like one small bike lane on the way back, but again, it's at night, it's a bit dangerous. I'm better off on the pavement, but, yeah, it's a cool piece of kit if you're willing to, you know, spend the money on it. It's not cheap, by any stretch of the imagination. Mine was 500 quid, so you're going to be spending a lot of money, by hook or by crook, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see on how that works out in the long run. Checking the chat. At least IndyCar is kind of vibing. Yeah, IndyCar's a lot more vibe because it's the reason why, Nick, is because for every 100 Formula One tweeters, there's one IndyCar tweeter. IndyCar gets 1/100th of the coverage that Formula One gets, and the only people that really talk about it on Twitter are the hardcores. Formula One is not like that. Formula One is a bit more diverse in that sense, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But we'll have to wait and see. Fun Orb. Do you think DTS influences some of the polarization we see, what with the storylines and its portrayal of people, intended or not? Well, yeah, I think to a degree. It's impossible to say for sure, but I think it's hard to say because you don't know who's coming as a result of DTS, and you don't know how else people got into the sport. You'd have to survey people, right? But I think it's fair to say that there is a wave of newer, younger fans that are following Formula One. Something that, when I was first on Twitter, like 2010, 2011, covering races, we didn't have that sort of community of minors and young teenagers and young adults that were following and watching the sport. We didn't really have that. It was a very, very strong man's world, and a lot of the people in it were in their 20s and up, and they were men. Like, that was my era growing up as a content creator. Like, people were around my sort of age back then. I'm 29 now, because it was my birthday last week, and, like, I'm still, I think, on the older end of F1 viewers that tweet about it on a regular basis. I think there's a ton of new fans that have come in the last 2 or 3 years who are 21 or less. I still think it's like our third most watched demographic on M101 is 16-year-olds or under. So there's been a big wave of newer fans, which in theory is exactly what F1 needed. Do not get it twisted. This is objectively a good thing. It's a net positive overall, because goddamn, I tell people this in my bookies all the time, because it's the same problem that horse racing has got. you ain't got a flood of younger people coming in watching your sports. Not really. Like, so you've got to be a bit careful on that, because you'll want to be trying to get that. I know, like, for example, pro wrestling loves that 18 to 34 demographic. For them, that's the most important, because they want younger viewers to come in and be legacy fans in the long term. But the consequence with that is that you get a bunch of fans that are coming in who are not as well educated as people like me that have been watching for 10, 20 years or whatever. Now again, this is not a bad thing. Unfortunately, some of us veteran fans on the platform, we like to gatekeep, whether we like it or not. And sometimes it's not even on purpose. We get tetsy at younger people that aren't maybe as well educated as some of the hardcore viewers that come around. And that's inevitable when new fans are coming in. Like, that's the consequence of being a up-and-coming, more popular sport. So when that happens, you're going to get some pushback. And that's why I've tried not to try and dunk on too much dumb shit, because one, no one really cares if you're an oracle of F1 knowledge on Twitter, right? If you watch the sport every round and you're able to remember exactly who won the 2006 Brazilian Grand Prix, or how many points Sebastian Vettel had when he won the world title in 2010, great. I'm sure there's a niche for you there somewhere. But most of the time, it doesn't really matter, because most of it you can just Google anyway. So I don't know why people get so tetsy about people that aren't as knowledgeable in this space. And I also think, I mean, Matt Lidder makes a very good question, is it really the fans or just the nature of social media platforms anyway? I think they're both. I think both are absolutely a factor here, because first and foremost, 99% of what you say on Twitter there'll be no repercussions for. At worst, you'll get a 24-hour pile-on, and then people will find something else to be mad at if there's a dumb tweet or a dumb opinion, if people don't really like it. It doesn't even necessarily have to be offensive, right? But if people don't like your opinion, you're going to get 20 quote retweets from people calling you an arsehole. That's the nature of the beast. Like, that is unfortunately the inevitable thing of Twitter that's unavoidable now. Everyone's got an opinion and they're not afraid to use it, and there's almost no repercussion for anything you say on the platform, and everyone's judgmental. And yeah, it's going to be a problem when you factor in that a younger audience, social media in general being more toxic, new fans mixing with old fans that don't like their land being invaded by people that aren't 30 years old and massively knowledgeable. When you factor all of that in and put it in a blender and hit the cappuccino button, you're gonna get messy scenarios like this. And I've been on both sides of that equation. Like, I had 500 people follow me because I used a randomizer to predict an F1 podium and got it right, and 300 people followed me on Twitter. You know, it's a very strange phenomenon, but you know, it's something that's hard to control. You know, it's difficult out there. Social media is all about attention, not education, I guess. Yeah, definitely, Matt. Without doubt, Matt. 110%. For people, the likes, the attention, the retweets, the follow accounts, that's all it's about for them. And I pity those sorts of people, because it's a very hollow experience, in my opinion. I'd happily cull 5,000 of my followers right now if it left me with 500 that were engageful, respectful, nice every 2 seconds, and were able to have mature and difficult conversations on the platform without fear of pylons, lacking context, or abuse. But I can't. Not unless I start a new account over, and I don't really want to do that, because it's just, it is a mess, to say the least. Yeah. Some people just tweet out controversy to get good retweets. Yeah, of course, absolutely. That's what trolls do. I've tried reporting. Yeah. I know who you're talking about, Charlie. He's one of the worst, and he's done it multiple times, and he's going to keep coming back because, again, even if you get banned on Twitter, even if you get your account suspended, you can just create a new one with a backup email address. Twitter needs to start IP banning people, like Reddit does on occasions. Like Reddit permanently banned Donald Trump's subreddit, for example. They need to IP ban people, but they're never going to do that because that takes resources and money. And they don't want to piss politicians off that are going to say, oh, big tech has got too much influence out there, and, we don't want to be banning people for freedom of speech, etc. It's... You can't win if you try, unfortunately. But, it's not ideal. You just have to make the most of it, and just hope for the best, and just try and curate a good following for yourself. Toxic masculinity too, absolutely, Katie. Yeah, motorsport, as long as it's been on social media, has been a male-dominated space, and it will continue to be a male-dominated space for generations to come. It's going to take a long time, if ever, that we get a perception of audience that's 50-50, or even close. Like, the big players, the big voices, the big influencers in this space, 95% of them are men. So that's always going to be a hard one to juggle and best, because that's just not going to happen. Newer gen fans don't know how lucky they are with the current net nowadays, because when me and Dre were watching the 2010s, we barely got anything. Very true. Ultra fans of drivers can be the worst. Yeah, I completely agree, Dom. And it goes for almost any driver. I will happily say, on the record, I would never say this on Twitter, but I will happily say it here. Lewis Hamilton's got one of the most insecure fan bases in all of sport. Comfortably. Like, when you see, examples of the same 15, 20, 25 names digging up the old Lewis Hamilton's joining Mercedes announcements on Twitter from 2012 and responding with gotcha tweets, I'm just like, touch some grass, man, honestly. It's wild to me that that's even a thing. Just have the one-bedroom light on here. But, it's... And this is not just a Hamilton problem, this is for, pretty much every major driver that's worth a damn. Some Vettel fans are awful. I've seen many of them. Some of them even follow me. The Max fans have been dreadful in the last month, going from anywhere from full-blown trolling to racial abuse. Of course, I think that's the infamous example of what happened after Silverstone. Some of Lando Norris's own fans get very tetchy about criticism of him because he gets fans that aren't necessarily F1 fans via Twitch and other social media platforms, which, in essence, is gold dust. But in the context of F1, it's difficult to juggle in that sense. So every fan base has its extremists that always go too goddamn far, and the Hamilton v Verstappen feud that we've had so far this year, which is ironic because they've had one major flashpoint this year, and that was Silverstone, and they both just seemed to move on really quickly about it and just put it under wraps for the most part. It was the team bosses and the fans and the influencers that all blew it up to the proportion that it was. Verstappen was initially angry on Twitter, but it didn't really go any further than that. And to be fair, he'd just been put in a wall at 51 times Earth's gravity. I can understand why people would be mad. I can understand why he'd be upset. But of course, people wanted to blame him. Was like, oh, why didn't you tell these guys to lay off the attacks? And that's not his responsibility. Not really. Most of us are grown-ass adults, and we know what we're doing. It's not up to Max Verstappen to tell his fans to ease off. You know, they were like, if people are going out of their way to be racially abusive towards Lewis Hamilton, like, Max Verstappen telling them to stop is not going to make them stop. You know, for example. So, you know, it's a mess, but you got to make the best of it. I've never seen the Latifi fan be rude or argumentative. It's probably just not very many of them. Even though I like Latifi, he seems like a nice boy. He seems like a nice lad. Okay driver. You know, he's never going to shine as hard as George Russell is in that setup, but I don't think he's terrible by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's a fine driver who's going to make a name for himself, and he's off the track. He seems like a delight. He seems like a very, very nice man. Likes his Nutella, always smiling, good old Canadian sense of humour. I like him. I like Latifi. Wish more people did. Very nice to see you wearing the Sancho shirt. Yeah, I guess so. Is that Hannah? Lavender! Oh, Hannah, good to see you, darling. Oh, mwah. Love you, girl. Good to see you. Hope you're doing alright. Didn't think I'd see you coming in here. But, oh, lovely. Love that. Oh my god, I'm getting super chat notifications. Charlie, you don't have to put your money in to get a question in, I promise. But thank you for the generosity. I will donate that to charity. What do you hope to see in the Schumi documentary? It's a good question. I mean, okay, if you want to jump the queue for questions, feel free to put a super chat donation in, but please do not feel like you have to do that. I will do my best to get through everybody. But you know, anything, I'm not, like, you know, that doesn't really matter what it is, but I'll try my best to get through everybody. I do like to ramble a lot. So that is kind of my own fault, really, to a degree. But what do you hope to see in the Schumi documentary? Let me think. Well, look, the trailer was emotional, as I think a lot of people would expect it to be. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell people what they need to see, because it will be many things for a lot of people. Me, personally, I think I'm right in saying that Asif Kapalia is the one directing it, who I think also did Senna. Let me double check. Schumacher, Netflix. Michael Wex directing it? Oh, okay. It's not Capaldi. I was worried about him, to be fair, because when Senna came out a few years ago, I enjoyed watching it, but it was a Senna puff piece. That was my biggest problem with it. And the reason why I tell you that it's a Senna puff piece is because I went to the cinema to watch it when it came out. You buy the Blu-ray version, which I actually have in the corner of my bedroom over there. You buy the Blu-ray version, there's an hour of Alan Prost interviews that didn't make the final film. Do you think that was by coincidence? Mm-hmm. Like, they knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't want to give Alan Prost's side of the story in those conversations, because I think they wanted to make Senna look like he was an angel. And he wasn't. Objectively, he was not. You know, it's... I'd love an unbiased look at throughout his darker side of Schumacher that made him interesting as well. Like, the most fascinating things for me about Schumi was, like, the bad stuff. Like Damon Hill in 94, like I said, Jacques Villeneuve in 97, you know, Raskas, the fact that, you know, like, you get little tidbits from other people's work, like Mark Webber in his book pulled Michael to one side and said, what were you playing at that day in Monaco? And he was like, well, I'm too far gone now. I think was the response that Michael gave to him. Especially because we don't cover Formula One now like we did 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we didn't have social media. Not really. Like, you had a bit of Facebook, but you didn't really have, like, the discussion and the focal points, the mass discourse that we have for Formula One now. Not unless you were going on internet forums or talking about it down the pub. So I'd like to see just a complete, documentary about the man, because to be fair as well, Schumacher was quite a private person. I'm surprised we're even getting this documentary. Like, I feel like I'm stunned that the family gave us consent for it, because the family has obviously been incredibly private, So that I'm fascinated as to seeing what they tell us about him, his health condition, if they talk about his health at all. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm fascinated to see what's in it, what's covered, what isn't. What do I hope to see? I just hope it's not a puff piece, because I think that was my big problem with Senna. Like, I think Senna, I think it waxed a bit too much lyrical about how great Senna was, and not about the complexities of Ayrton Senna that made him the human being that he was. Because, and I've said it before, if you want a more balanced view of Ayrton Senna, watch Top Gear's tribute to the man. It's only about 16 minutes long, and the last 3 or 4 minutes are kind of fluffy with Hamilton driving his old car. But the first 13 minutes, talking about him, his pace, the incidents he had, the sit-down chat with Martin Brundle, who had a brilliant fight with in Formula 3. There's a great documentary about that Sky Sports produced as well, talking about Martin Brundle's fight with Ayrton Senna in Formula 3. It's well worth a watch as well, in my opinion. Check that out if you haven't already. But they talk about the crashes, the qualifying speed, the incidents, the nature of how he fit into F1 at the time. But the point is that they were unbiased. They called out Senna for some of his aggressive actions. They had no problem, saying, well, look, this is the guy that was going to be like, I'm going to stick my car here, I'm going to make it your choice to whether you want to have the accident or not. And I thought that was far more fascinating and interesting to me, because, the point Martin Brundle made is he absolutely took out Prost on purpose that day in Suzuka to win a championship. But at the same end of the coin, he'd be the first man to leap out of a car and help a guy that he thought was hurt. But he was willing to kill somebody else to win a championship. That hypocritical, two sides of the coin nature, I think, are fascinating, personally. And I think a lot of that is very, very interesting. So that's what I would like to see out of the Schumacher documentary, but of course, we'll have to wait and see how it turns out. I will be watching. I know Viandra asked, do you think you'll make a review of it? We'll certainly talk about it. If I get a platform on the podcast, if we've got time 1 week to talk about it, I'd absolutely like to. If not, I will certainly type up my thoughts on the website at some point, most definitely. So there'll be something about it, I think. I can confidently say that. I said I'd do it for Drive to Survive at some point, but then I just lost interest after Season 1. So yeah, I'm just going to double check the chat real quick. Leafy's so down to earth. Yeah, for a son of a billionaire, he really is. Daniel, so do you think this is happening in part because this is the closest title fight in a decade and new fans are only now seeing how toxic an even title fight can be? Definitely, Daniel. Definitely. This is the first real proper title fight of the social media era. 2016 maybe, but 2016 felt different because 2016 was so one-sided in Hamilton's favour. Nobody gave Nico Rosberg a prayer until he won it. So it didn't really feel like a title fight because most of Twitter was rooting for Hamilton. And nobody really genuinely thought Nico Rosberg could win that title until maybe Japan. And by that point, we didn't have the Hamilton blows his engine up moment yet. So that could have been interesting in its own right. So yeah, I think that's definitely a factor, Daniel, definitely. Never seen Senna or Rush, which I guess isn't ideal. Rush is well worth watching. Very entertaining movie, I'll say that much. It's The fact that Lauda said it was like 80% accurate, that's already pretty good praise. Of course, it was never going to be 100% spot on. It's a movie, you're trying to entertain people. The story in itself for some people will not be enough on its own to entertain and captivate people. But if Niki Lauda himself was saying that it was 80% accurate, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. It is a very entertaining movie. Daniel Bruhl, was I think nominated for an Oscar for it. He was excellent in that movie. Chris Hemsworth, the Australian twang gets into his accent as James Hunt a little bit, but he did a remarkable job. Ron Howard did a very, very good job with that movie. Senna, it's definitely worth watching at least once. I'm not going to lie to you, there is a lot of never-before-seen content in Senna, like onboards and video footage, that are definitely worth watching. Like, I wouldn't go back and see it multiple times, but I would certainly see it once. And I'll give Senna this before I move on to other hardcore questions. If you've never seen it before, the last 10 minutes are a very difficult watch. Like, from an emotional standpoint, like, the last 10 minutes, it gets you. Like, I remember watching it, the day I watched it in the cinema, I watched it with my dad and my brother. And, like, Ryan, and he'll kill me if I admit this, if he ever watches this back, and I don't think he will, but he bawled his eyes out at the end of that movie. I was crying myself. It's the last 10 minutes are incredibly powerful, and I'm not going to... Now, I don't think you need me to tell you as a spoiler alert that what the end of the documentary is going to maintain. It's kind of obvious. But let's just say the pictures, the scenes, the funeral, it's incredibly emotional. And, like, the one that got me was when... I think it's one of the final scenes in the movie when Alan Prost is holding Ayrton Senna's helmet. That got me. Because everyone seemed to think those two hated each other when they didn't. They had an incredible amount of respect for each other as racing drivers and as people. They were both devout Christians, just Senna was a lot more open about it, but Prost always had an immense amount of respect for Senna as a racing driver. So when you see him at the funeral holding Senna's helmet, oh it hurt. Oh, it hurt. It gets you. It really does. And as Charlie points out, they said, there's never been a death since, and unfortunately we've had one since then, and that just makes it doubly tragic. But it is absolutely worth watching at least once. I'm not the biggest fan of Senna. It's got problems. But especially if you're an uneducated fan, you'll definitely get something out of it. Like some of the scenes in it are incredible to watch. Never seen Ford versus Ferrari, mind you. And the comments have pointed that out, but I've never actually watched it. Maybe sounds like it fought with a posh English accent family for 3 years. Yeah, that's what it is. It's like Hemsworth was trying to put on a thick English accent and he just about got away with it. He did sound like Hunt, to be fair. Like, he did a pretty good job. It was a bit more corny, but then again, James Hunt's entire character as a human being was corny as fuck. He was, your classic smoking, shagging, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, handsome Englishman who could fuck half the paddock but then drive a race car really, really fast. So. Let's have a look in the chat real quick. Yeah, I used to be heavily critical of Senna, Schumacher and Briatore for their cheating, but nowadays I can't lie, those moments are pretty entertaining. Look, I'm nowhere near as harsh a fan on cheating as I used to be for the one reason off, it's human. Humans cheat. They'll do anything they can to win. And in motorsport, people bend every rule in the goddamn book. You're meant to do that. You're meant to exploit the rule book. You're meant to try and gain every advantage possible. Like, I said it before, like, Red Bull trying to get Hamilton a bigger penalty was funny as hell to me. A lot of people didn't seem to agree with that, but I thought it was funny as shit. And the reason why I thought it was funny as shit was because it was blatantly desperate. Everybody knew Red Bull didn't have shit to give to the FIA in terms of an appeal, right? But if you're Christian Horner, you're not doing your job properly as a team boss if you're not at least asking the question of can we get this punishment lengthened or made bigger? It's what any smart team boss would do. And yeah, obviously besides the abusive side of it, I thought, in a vacuum, I thought that part of it at least was hilarious. Funnel, MotoGP, what do you think of the Dovizioso Yamaha satellite team rumours? Why not? I mean, why not? SRT are gone. You know, it looks like the team boss down there, I think Rizlan, is going to buy the team out himself and run it as a brand new team. I know that they said they want to have younger riders develop on it, but that's just not going to happen. The setup that SRT are leaving behind is just not very good. The rider with the most upside in their camp right now is probably Darren Binder. And Darren Binder is probably going to jump up 2 classes next year. Because Jake Dixon has gone backwards this season. Xavi Vierge is just another middle-of-the-road, decent veteran, but nothing special. And John McPhee was pretty mid in Moto 3, so Darren Binder's your best guy. So if you can, if you were willing to take Rossi on as a placeholder for a year, you might as well take Andrea Dovizioso, who at this point is probably a better rider, even with a year out. Like, even if it's just for a year, have the field reset itself. Maybe someone really talented can come along, like someone like maybe an Ayagura next year. Could be really good with a lot of the other top tier Moto 2 guys cleared out the way. That could work, if for a short term deal. I know there was rumours about Sam Lowe's. Lowe's would be fine for a year. Like, I don't have a major problem with that. So, that could work. I mean, look, I think Dovi's still a world class bike rider. He's versatile. He's a great development hand. He knows how to get the most out of a motorcycle. And he's one of the very, very few people who can keep Marc Marquez honest at his best. That in itself is a valuable weapon. And it's not like that Yamaha can't win races, because it can, and it has, and it will. So I think there's a lot to look forward to out of that. Hi Vic, good to see you. Dom Hamilton and Rosberg is what we thought Senna and Prost were. Yeah, that's probably quite a valid comparison. Matthew, Ford vs Ferrari is far more fictional than Rush, if that makes sense. Yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you're getting at there. I think NASCAR said that, Matt, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. I think NASCAR was where that phrase originally came from, because NASCAR had that all the time in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, trying to find clever ways around the rule book. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I think is what the American version of that was. Damn it, I'm late again. Hi, John C. Good to see you, man. Yeah, we are selfish as people, absolutely. Does Andretti buy a team in F1, or do they become the 11th team? Jeremy, I would say they buy a current team out. And I would say I think there's a reasonable chance it could be Alfa Romeo. They're not going to buy Haas, because Haas, for all intents and purposes, is Dimitri Mazepin's team. Depending on who you ask, there are a lot of people that say that Nikita Mazepin's father, Dimitri, already owns a significant portion of the team. Maybe not a controlling stake, but enough where he will give his son every chance to succeed, basically. So, and Gene Haas had pretty much made it clear he was going to sell up, because I think Haas underestimated how much money it was going to take in order to be a success in Formula 1, because he said, we're prepared to lose £100 million a year on this, to which I say, that's normal. Like, that's normal. Like, if you're not in the top 4 in Formula 1, you're probably losing money. In fact, you can be a top team and you're probably losing money. Because if you're two of the big three, i.e. Ferrari and Mercedes, you've got road cars to sell. And a lot of places like Mercedes value the marketing that comes from being an F1 winner. I think Merckx before have valued the marketing success of their world titles as in the billions of dollars. So they will happily lose money on the team because they think the marketing value of being successful in Formula 1 will sell them more road cars. The independents don't have that luxury. Like, no one is going out here buying a Haas 3D printer because their F1 team is doing well. You know what I mean? Like, Williams, for example, are the king of the independents from an F1 standpoint, but what are you doing with that? Like, how are you making money on your team? You make money on the technological department. And you sold that off last year. So, you know, Haas, I think, is Mazepin's team. Williams could sell up. You know, Darlington Capital, you know, I think they're the sort of firm that would strip assets and sell to the next dude. A lot of companies do that, where they will buy an asset, strip it down, and sell on to the highest bidder. I think Williams is a possibility, but I think the one that screams to me, buy me, is Alfa Romeo. A half-decent team that can punch above its weight with the right drivers. They've got good drivers in their camp already, potentially as well on the undercard. You've got Canamilo as a test driver. You've got potentially Theo Pourchaire, who's a part of their academy. I don't think he's ready for the highest level yet, but I think he's certainly a name you could potentially put in there later. But you're not building a brand new team. Building an F1 team from scratch is stupidly expensive. I think Audi worked out about 4 or 5 years ago that if they wanted to start an F1 team from scratch, it would cost them 1.2 billion euros. They ain't got that sort of cash. They're still recovering from Dieselgate. That's why they're quitting Formula E. They ain't going to be spending that sort of money on building an F1 team from scratch. Your best chance is buying an existing team's assets and building on top of it. That's what everybody has done in F1 for the last 20 years or so. We tried getting brand new teams, but they were lied to. Caterham, HRT, and the artists formerly known as Manor. Like, Virgin, as it was back then. Like, they were told, oh, we're going to bring in a cost cap, it'll be fine, don't worry, and then the cost cap didn't come for another decade. And by that point, they were all dead. You know, so the sport has finally realised, at least, that the sport has got a problem with sustainability and are trying to do something about it. But it took us years and dead cash and dead teams to get to that point. So yeah, I think if it was going to be anybody, I think the two obvious teams that Andretti could invest in would be Williams and Alfa Romeo if he really wants to have an F1 team. But I stand by this. Why would you want a bottom feeder F1 team? Sounds like a really, really bad investment to me, personally. Great quote. The best way to become a millionaire in F1 is to start out as a billionaire. Yeah, spot on. Spot on. Red Bull are the exception, Nick. And the only reason Red Bull are the exception is because they put so much money into marketing sports in the first place that having a good F1 team was just good for business. again, like Red Bull as a brand, as a promotion, are fucking everywhere. Like, they're not doing it to sell more energy drinks. They're doing it because they're trying to sell themselves as a brand and as a marketing firm. And sometimes spending a couple of $100 million a year on an F1 team is a good way to work that out. Said it before. Like, Master Switch just lets Horner and Marco do his thing because it's effectively the Arden F1 team in all but name. Look at it that way, personally. Matthew said, any thoughts on Eau Rouge as a corner on complex of track after the pile-up today in the W Series? Twitter seems split on not safe enough versus road-tinted spectacles. Don't change Spa. Look, I think the most important, I think the most important people to ask are the drivers. Their opinion matters most. They're the ones that have to drive it at the end of the day. And if Cannamilot, Jack Aitken, and Pietro Fittipaldi have all said there is an issue with that corner, it is probably worth having a look at that corner and seeing what you can do about it. Now, is the corner inherently dangerous? No. Is the lack of runoff a part of the problem? Hell yes. Like, I will comfortably say that they need more runoff on the top of the hill because it is a blind corner and the wall is extremely... The right side wall is extremely close to the racing line, which doesn't help. And then if somebody has a pile-up going up the hill on the left, if they hit the wall the wrong way, you can bounce back onto the track on the racing line. Like, I think it was Betchka Visa's car that ended up upside down on the racing line as the end result of that incident. That is a huge problem. Like, you need to extend that runoff. Like, if you're gonna have just, you know, put some high grip painting down like the French do, and extend the runoff if you can, because, like, this is not the first big pile-up that's happened at Eau Rouge and Radalon. Like, it's not the first. In fact, it's actually probably the third or fourth major one in the last half-decade. Like, we had Aitken at the Spa 24. We had, obviously, the tragic passing of Antoine Hubert. We had this one with, you know, Sarah Moore and the 6-car W Series pile-up. We had Pietro Fittipaldi in sports cars who broke his leg on that same sequence of corners. Now, the track is listening. They are going to put bigger runoffs on that part of the track soon. So I don't want to completely dunk on Spa here for obvious reasons. And hell, they just lost their fucking CEO last week in the most tragic of circumstances. You know, so I don't want to put too much pressure on Spa or be too critical, because they are listening and they are going to put a runoff or bigger runoffs because they want bike racing to come back. They badly want a MotoGP race at Spa. Now, I don't know if going up the hill is too dangerous. It's hard to say because we've not raced those bikes around that track before. I know, like, Cal Crutchlow was asked about it a couple of years ago, and he was like, hard no, is what he basically said regarding that. The blessing for them is because they're on bikes, the corner speeds will be a lot slower. Because in Formula 1 cars now, it's not a corner. In the dry, it's flat out at 180, 190 miles an hour. Like, on bikes, they'll be slowing down. They'll be hitting the brakes because that is a genuine corner. I'll give you an example. It's like Austria at the Red Bull Ring with MotoGP. In Formula 1 cars and in sports cars where they have more downforce, what MotoGP would call turn 2 is not a corner. On bikes, it is a corner because bikes don't have that level of downforce. So, and again, the Red Bull Ring is probably going to put a chicane up that back straight next year to slow down the entry speed into what would be the old turn 3 will now be turn 4, but, you know. I just hate the fact more than anything else that we only ever seem to have these conversations when something horrible happens. That's what frustrates me about it, because if you try to have a proactive discussion about safety in motorsport, you get seen as a fucking coward or something along those lines. Like, you know, this is motorsport, but it's meant to be dangerous. There's meant to be a level of risk. No. There's a risk to anything in life. I could walk out of my back door right now and a T-tray could land on my head and kill me. The odds are microscopically low, but there is still an inherent level of risk to that activity. It's what level of risk would be deemed acceptable. And I've seen enough incidents at that corner at Eau Rouge now to think that it's more than just coincidence. It might be a track problem. But if you mention that any time other than a major accident, you'll seem like you're some sort of friggin' Jobsworth arsehole, and I don't believe in that mentality. I don't like the fact that these conversations are often reactive. That, like, we're reacting now because this awful thing happened. Like, let's look at it objectively. The goalposts will always keep moving with motorsport because technology moves forward. The sport moves forward. The drivers move forward. You know, geography changes. Cars change. Technology changes. You know, we have to... Safety should move alongside that. If anything, safety should be the first thing on the list. Because if it ain't safe, we shouldn't be racing there. At the end of the day. And I find it baffling that people are so strong on the Kool-Aid, like they get such a boner when there's a level that, like they almost need the danger to justify themselves watching the sport. That the moment you talk about safety, it's like a personal attack. And yeah, Shivam, I see what you mean. Paul di Resta's comment that Formula 1 cars are now too safe for Spa. I'm just like, Paul di Resta. A man died in a Formula 2 car here 2 years ago. What the fuck? Who's still employing that man, honestly? Because that was such a tone-deaf comment. Given that there are people still grieving over that man's loss 2 years on. Talking about how, you know, these F1 cars are too safe nowadays, yada yada yada. No, they're not safe enough. Quite frankly, we should be having these conversations more often. And again, just hours after that incident, of course, we have a major accident that could have been so much worse than how it actually turned out. Thank God, all 6 drivers involved in that W Series pileup, you know, walked away and was okay. But it makes me angry that like people like Jonty and Jonty is one of the biggest advocates for safety on Twitter that I will know and I will tell you about. And look, I don't necessarily agree with everything the man says either, but I will always have 120% respect for his approach and the fact he's one of the very few people on social media that was willing to push the needle forward and ask the hard questions, not just when something awful happens. And that's what frustrates me about being a motorsport fan, is because we only have these chats when someone dies, or when someone gets seriously hurt, or when someone has a near miss. And it's frustrating. One of the biggest reasons this wasn't fatal was because they were driving Formula 3 cars, which are so much slower than Formula 2 and Formula 1 cars. But then we talk about it. Formula 2, again, a guy died in a Formula 2 car at this very track 2 years ago. Obviously, Antoine Hubert, I don't want to call him just a guy, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean when I say that. I don't say it as a derogatory term. But a guy died here 2 years ago. Like, that should have been enough to have a hard conversation right there and then. Quite frankly. And we didn't. You know. To even get to the halo, there was years of pushback. And that's the thing about the halo. People will say, oh, it's ugly, it looks terrible, yada yada yada. Does anyone care now? We've had them for half a decade now. They were developed for half a decade more. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, right? But the Halo has objectively saved lives. Like, the Halo has absolutely done its job. It's saved lives. It has deflected debris. It has deflected incidents. It has stopped, cars from mounting other cockpits. And we had actual Formula 1 drivers like Nico Hulkenberg say that, oh, it's an eyesore, it looks ugly. And I'm just like, who fucking cares what it looks like? If it saves a life, just one, I will have it forever, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, as Zoe points out, its sister, the aero screen, might have saved Felix Rosenquist's life last week because a piece of debris hit Rosenquist's aero screen dead on. Could have been a serious injury there. Something very, very similar was what killed Justin Wilson. Still miss Justin Wilson a lot. He was a fantastic ambassador for IndyCar and for IndyCar motorsport and the autistic community in general because he was dyslexic. I miss him every time I see an IndyCar race. His life could have been saved. Please, let's have these discussions more rather than just waiting for the next big accident to happen. It may just save lives. Oh, God, I went off on one a little bit there. Apologies for that. I don't normally like getting a bit heated over things like that, but God, it's frustrating sometimes. Yeah, John T, I don't envy you, man. It's like the amount of pushback for being vocal about safety. It's sheer dick waving. It's all it is. It's not nice that people want to talk about it, but then people just don't. It's like people would rather stick their heads in the sand, and I just don't like that attitude. I just don't like that. You have to, like, you've got to just brush it under the carpet, hope it goes away, and don't have these hard conversations about the sport that we have. No, the sport progresses when you have these hard conversations. Fact. You can't just sweep it under the carpet and hope it goes away. Pardon me. Yeah. I agree with all you guys in the chat. I'm not a big fan of Paul, the rest of the pundit, either. I think he spins the narrative drum up a bit too much. And his comment he made today was objectively just fucking stupid. And he should know better. He really should know better. I completely agree. I think I'd love to see Nico Rosberg full time on Sky Sports F1. I think he's having someone in the commentary box that knows how these cars actually work is brilliant. Like, Martin Brundle is in his 60s now and is winding it down in his career. I would happily have Nico Rosberg in the box as a second commentator all day, every day. I'm not he hasn't quite got the broadcasting touch that Brundle has had over the last 20 years, of course, but that'll come in time anyway. But there it is. You can't do anything about that, unfortunately. They like having name guys in the paddock. They like having big name pundits because they think people will watch. So, it is what it is. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you guys in the comments. Widen the runoff, change the line of the corner. I don't see any don't get me wrong, they are doing that, so hopefully next year, the year after, we'll see that in action, because like I said, Spa wants to be a bike track again as well, and I think it will be a fantastic bike track if they fix Eau Rouge properly. I think it's got superb potential as a bike track. They need a bit of work on a couple of corners here and there, but I don't think it's a million miles away. Certainly. Checking the comments with the changes being made to Austria. Do you think it will make changes to the F1 race? No, Kelly. Because they'll still have the front straight that the F1 guys can still use. It will just be a chicane for the MotoGP riders. I think the F1 race will be absolutely fine. But the run down to turn 2 for MotoGP is a big part of the problem, because they're entering turn 2 at 190 miles an hour, and that's what caused the very nasty Frankie Morbidelli Johann Zarco crash we had there last year, which also launched the bikes back onto the track. That was the big problem with that race, and they've extended that barricade wall up to near the apex of turn 3, but I don't think that in itself is enough. It wouldn't do much to stop that sort of incident from happening again. That's the problem with it. Yeah, if McLaren help Andretti set up an F1 team, it could be feasible, maybe. If Zach Brown's willing to throw that more money at it, he could do. If he wants a second team he can influence. That seems to be the wave these days. But it's very expensive. And remember, Zach Brown doesn't own the McLaren team. The Bahraini royal family owns the F1 team, and they've already sold off a third of that team to raise another 170 million odd quid. So, like, Zach's running out of equity. You know, there's not an awful lot more he can flip to raise cash. So, he's got to be a bit careful on that front, if you ask me. Yeah, really anxious about the racing. Don't blame you, Marlene. Completely understand that one. The rest has managed to insult his own cousin on several occasions. Yeah, he's Dario Franchitti's cousin, for those who don't know. And Dario Franchitti's one of the better IndyCar drivers of all time. A guy that's won the 500 3 times, won a series title. Paul's a bit dumb for that sometimes. He's a bit tone deaf to the fact that, you know, even in your own house, you've got a problem, you know? So, it's an issue. Nico and Jax is the future of commentary. No IndyCar this weekend, by the way, Nick. They're back in 3 weeks' time at Portland. They're on a bit of a break at the moment because they've had a lot of rounds back to back to back. The big question is, are they going to race at Long Beach? Because I know they're going through it COVID-wise, but IndyCar's in the middle of a 3-week break. They'll be back in Portland in a couple of weeks' time. Look, I will happily say this on the record, and I'm not just being biased because for some reason Alex chooses to follow me on Twitter. I do not know why. Apparently, Hazel shared me a DM one time on Twitter that said, "Oh, I follow you and Drake because you're not afraid to call shit out." Which, you know, I've not spoken to Alex directly, but he seems like a genuinely great guy. And look, he is, for me, between him and Jack Nicholls, maybe two of the best commentators in motorsport right now. I think Jack Nicholls is superb on Formula E, and I think Nicholls is superb. I've been listening to that man since he was doing commentaries on Formula Sim racing back in the day. You know, so seeing him in Formula E now is wonderful. I root for that man immensely. Again, he's another guy that follows me on Twitter because he watched some of my earlier content, so I'm very blessed on that front. Alex Jakes is a fantastic goddamn commentator. Really, like, he's the best play-by-play man in arguably all of motorsport right now. I watch him commentate the F1 races, not just on Channel 4, but on the Pit Lane channel. Let's be honest here, my Discord kind of not so legally streams these races sometimes. And we have it on the Pit Lane channel, and Alex Jakes commentates over that. So much better than Crofty. My God. And look, I don't dislike Crofty as much as a lot of people do, but Alex Jakes is the best in the biz. as far as I'm concerned. I think he's a superb commentator, and I hope Sky looks at him one day. I've joked about this before, but David Croft is a better darts commentator than he is an F1 commentator. He's fantastic at the darts. Whenever they're at the alley pally for the Worlds, or the match play or whatever, Croft is a fantastic commentator on that. He's a great darts commentator. I just don't think he can handle the hecticness of Formula One sometimes. And I think Jake's is superb. I really do think he's an absolutely excellent commentator, and I would happily sit down and watch him all day. Easy. So So I am all for Jake's getting a bigger gig in the future, So, yeah, completely agree with you as well, Dom. Jolyon Palmer is a superb pundit. If you listen to him on 5 Live, if you listen to him on Formula One's website, he does videos every once in a while, he does written pieces. Jolyon is a great pundit. Really does know his shit. He does the homework. He does his hard research. He's not afraid to. He doesn't take himself too seriously, which is always a plus. He's an excellent pundit. So I know people like to make jokes because obviously he wasn't a great F1 driver, but he's a superb pundit and analyst. I think he's excellent at that. I'm jealous because if I was me and I wanted to get an F1, that's the sort of role I'd be aiming for. And I think Jolyon's superb in that sense. Have you ordered yourself a CR7 shirt then, Dre? No. And I will not. I had a feeling this question would come up. For the record, I don't know if you can see it from here, but Jadon Sancho's on the back of my away shirt here. Look, I do not approve of this move. I think Manchester United need a defensive midfielder to link their attack and their defence. I don't think we needed another striker. We have plenty of options for players who can play striker. Martial, Rashford, Mason Greenwood, Edinson Cavani, Ngala as well as another option in the youth academy that's coming up and is probably going to get some minutes this season. As far as I'm concerned, even purely from a footballing standpoint, purely on that basis, Ronaldo is not the sort of player that will help our offense. He actually would have been a much better fit at Man City, where they swarm the box as an attacking team, and you've got a super efficient finisher in the box like Ronaldo to polish chances away. And for me, he'd be a better fit at City. He's 37 years old later this year. He's 37 in February. He's going to be paid an awful lot of money for an anchor of a contract. And I think in 2 years' time, he'll fuck off and go to the MLS. Oh, wait, he can't do that, because for some strange reason, he's not allowed in the United States of America. Can't imagine why. So even from a footballing standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to me. I get it. He's Cristiano Ronaldo, and I know a lot of people, emotionally, love Ronnie. I understand why. I get it. He was a phenomenal football player for us the first time round. I get it. I get why people are emotionally attached to him, because he was such a dynamic attacker when he was at United the first time round. That is not Ronaldo's game anymore. He is a ball-dominant, centrepiece, box-based finisher now, and that's not what United need. United needs a holding mid that can link their levels together. Like you say, JCR, someone like Bissouma, someone like a Declan Rice, someone like a Wilfred Ndidi. I would rather spend that money towards Camavinga at Rennes as a holding mid that can maybe link the play. Someone like Renato Sanchez. Someone like Wilfred Ndidi or Declan Rice. Declan Rice is probably going to be too expensive because I think West Ham want like 70, 80 mil. That would have made a lot more sense for United as a sign-in to have towards the end of the window to round off the team. We didn't need another forward. We have Bruno Fernandes, Paul Pogba and Jadon Sancho in our line of three. We have Edinson Cavani, Marcus Rashford, Jesse Lingard, Mason Greenwood as attacking options. Amad Diallo is an attacking option. We did not need another forward. And then, I'm not even going to mention the personal problems that come with Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, I'm going to say this allegedly, because I don't want to get sued. But, for all intents and purposes, he probably raped someone. And I don't want an alleged rapist playing for my football club. Unfortunately, as has been proven by the Benjamin Mendy story as well on the other side of Manchester, sadly, for football fans in this country, rape is not a deal breaker. And this is going to come with a sensitivity warning, so please look after yourselves. Because this is good. This is obviously sensitive subject matter. But we're talking about someone that allegedly raped someone. The stories of what's been said in courts and over the trial and over what's been said, if you read those stories, they are utterly horrific. I will never, ever, ever support or endorse someone like that with that accusations levelled against him at the football club that I support. For me, he is Portuguese player number 7, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't want to support someone like that at Manchester United, or anywhere in professional football, for that matter. And, like I said, unfortunately, as Benjamin Mendy's case has proven, it's not a deal breaker for people. It just isn't. What he did, what he's alleged to have done, is disgusting, horrific, awful, disgusting, terrible. Every thesaurus-related word you can think of, and he shouldn't be playing professional football. He should be in a prison cell if those charges hold up. Quite frankly. So yeah, from a purely football standpoint, I don't endorse it, and from a humanitarian level, I really don't endorse it. So I know a lot of people are going to do backflips because, unfortunately, rape is not a deal breaker. Which, unfortunately, I live in a country in the United Kingdom that I think a lot of men would divorce their wives before their football club. And that is alarming to me. So it's one of those things where you've got to look in the mirror about what you support, and you've got to question all of it, because, I know people that I consider friends, people I respect, people that are women, that are jumping up and down in excitement over this move. And it blows my mind that is not a disqualifier for some people. Like, one of my good friends, Ollie Dawes, writes for Preston North End. And they signed Ched Evans last year. And the amount of blowback he got for saying, I will not endorsing this move for Ched Evans, a guy that, again, did jail time for rape, but then was let go on a mistrial. And then when certain football fans are like, oh, Jessica Ennis should apologise. For fucking what? It makes you ill. And the fact that Benjamin Mendy allegedly breached his bail to still play for Man City, if that is true, the entire system needs to be looked at. All of it. from top to bottom, as far as I'm concerned. Like, if he's breached his bail, surely that would mean that Man City were in on what was going on. And if they've let him get away with that, that is disgusting, and that club needs to be looked at top to bottom at who's running it, because that is a horrific thing to happen. So, no. From a football standpoint, I don't think it makes much sense. From a personnel standpoint, I think it makes even less sense, and I would rather not associate with, for me, a scumbag, quite frankly. And yeah, Shivam, it's not talked about very much because it was kind of brushed under the carpet because CR7 paid the victim hush money back in 2009. This happened like 12 years ago. And a lot of people just don't talk about it because Ronaldo is probably the biggest name in all of sport at this point. You know? So Manchester United, I think the Glazers opened their pockets up because they think nostalgia, vibes, and cashing in on the biggest name in global football is a good PR move to get them back on side with the fans. And I just think that's entirely a complete and utter ruse. It's just awful. It's awful that people will just look at that and just look at the X's and O's and look at the numbers and think that's okay, when it just isn't. If there was any justice in the world, he'd be in a prison cell right now. So yeah, forgive me if I'm pissing on people's bonfires by talking about it in this way, because I know a lot of people are excited. I know a lot of people are going to brush that away and not talk about it because they just care about their football clubs and hope that they win. I am not one of those people. And yeah, if that makes me a bad person, then you know, so be it. And yeah, I completely get what you mean, Charlie, when it comes to Kobe Bryant as well, because Kobe had an accusation of that. And the case was dismissed, settled out of court. It's a part of Kobe's legacy, whether we want to admit it or not. You be the judge. Because unfortunately that's all we've got. So even, like, I think America in general was a lot more forgiving about Kobe Bryant on that one. I think also because it happened in 2003, I think it was, so I don't think we were just having those sorts of conversations about sexual assault or anything along those lines in general in 03 compared to 2021, so, you know, it's complicated, to say the least, but it is a part of Kobe's legacy, whether we want to admit it or not, then it is an ugly side of it, and I felt guilty about hanging his jersey up on my side of the wall, which is why you can see it's no longer there. It's hard. It's hard to have these conversations, but they need to happen, and because it's not as simple as just, oh look, we got Ronaldo back, woo, yeah, awesome. You know, it's human nature. Athel saying, are you up to date with how ATP is handling this on the tennis side of things? Isn't that the Alex Zverev case? Because didn't he, unfortunately, abuse his ex-girlfriend? And that all just seemed to get pushed under the rug? Like, I think, didn't he put out a statement today, Alex Zverev? I think he did, didn't he? Yeah. I've engaged my German and American lawyers in the matter. They have already obtained the preliminary injunction against the source and the author who published the false allegations. The court followed our arguments and states the accusations aroused are defamatory and false. The lawyers have therefore initiated further proceedings against the source and the author. Quote, I have categorically and unequivocally denied having abused Orla. I also fully support the creation of an ATP domestic violence policy. I will not address this matter any further. messy. My God. It's why I know there was a lot of kickback when he won the Olympic gold medal earlier this year. You know, so what can you say? When you've got lawyers, when you've got people that can defend you, and when you've got the unfortunate nature of the fact that the vast majority of these sorts of cases never see a courtroom, you're gonna get days like that one, and it's awful, and it sucks, and unfortunately, that's the way sports. That's the way sport goes. But yeah. It's not great at all. Alec was already pretty disliked in Germany before this even surfaced. Jesus. Personal opinion, but I can't disassociate the art from the artist. Completely fair. Shivam. Don't blame me at all. Like, some people can. That's their right. You know, if that's the way their brain works and they can do that and they can still enjoy something, that's their right. That's their prerogative. I find it hard. I find it hard sometimes. I really do. I know a lot of Harry Potter fans have had to have that conversation regarding people like J.K. Rowling. You know, I know people have looked that way over people like Woody Allen and his movies. You know, it's... and the accusations that have been made against him in the past. I get it. I get both sides of the argument. I get how people can... some people can shut that off. Look, I have ASD. I'm autistic myself. I can shut the emotional side of my brain off very, very easily. So I can completely relate to how somebody else might be able to do that. I don't think it's a healthy thing to do. And I try very hard not to have my brain just go to autopilot whenever something bad happens. But, you know, I can see how certain people might be able to do that because they want to just... I personally think it's a matter of sticking your head in the sand and hoping the problem goes away, and that's how people cope, unfortunately, rightly or wrongly. So, you know, it is what it is, you know. Good. If you want a bit of good news to come out of the W Series, if you've not seen them on Twitter, they've just said that Ayla Agren has been discharged from hospital. She's fine. Bechka Visa is still in hospital. A CT scan has revealed no injuries. She's still awaiting the results of a leg x-ray, but is in good spirits and discussing the accident. So, good news coming out of the W Series. It looks like everybody involved was okay, which is the most important thing. So, you know, that is a plus. That is most definitely a plus. So that's good to hear. But, yeah, Lost Profits was the biggest one. Some people saying it doesn't affect the music hurt my brain. Look, Jonty, don't take it personally. Some people can do that. Some people can't. Brains are very complicated things, and they work in very mysterious ways. I don't think we'll ever be able to fully figure that out. You know, so I try not to read too much into it. It's not worth going down that emotional black hole, you know. Just checking Twitter real quick as well. Yeah, and if you watch now how young women in motorsport fandom get preyed on by men, some of who work in the industry as well as constantly belittled for being fans, it's a wonder there are female fans at all. I can't even begin to imagine someone like me having the presence I have on Twitter if I was a woman. And if I was a woman under the age of 20. that sounds like hell, quite frankly. I've seen how people like Amelia get hit, and, you know, I've said it before on Twitter, and then she used to follow me, she don't follow me, I don't know why she did, but, like, for example, she, I think, is 17, like, well, you know, she's 17 years old, and she is so far ahead of the curve for the average 17-year-old in terms of trying to crack the industry. She's amazing, and then, you know, she gets carpet bombed for the occasional bad take. It's just, I find it laughable, you know? Hazel gets 5 times as much shit that I do. And she is stubborn and even more grounded in her principles than I am. And I thought I was bad. She's an unbelievable goddamn journalist. One of the very best in Formula E. And anything else she tries to put her head into, she has to moderate comment sections on some pretty nasty places like race fans' comment sections. And she gets it 5 times worse than I ever do, because she's got 5 times my Twitter followers. She's got 20,000 followers, I think she has, something like that. And I don't know how they do it, man. I really like, she's got twice my follower account. She's got nearly 12,000, and she follows a lot more people as well. So, like, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. Yeah, Amelia's a minor. Yeah, she's a minor. Like, people are like, like, people I've got no problem piling on a child, and I think that's just really goddamn weird at best, because most of the guys in this space are in their 20s. A lot of the women in this space are not. And, yeah, again, I find it remarkable that Twitter can't do more to protect those sorts of people, because, you know, dickheads can do whatever they want. They can organise hate mobs, they can organise pile-ons if they really want to, and you're doing it to a goddamn child. I just find that embarrassing. Like it's not to be crude, but I think it's big micro penis energy that how certain people in this community behave, and we could all do so much better if we all put in a percentage effort, but we just don't, because we don't care enough. I've had some of the nicest people in the world DM me talking about how, oh, Dre, I can't believe you put up with this, Dre, you know, you're really, really good at what you do, and, you know, Dre, you know, you're like this, and this, and you're doing a really great job. And then we'll still follow the dickheads who they know are fanning up this hate mail. So how much do you actually give a shit? You don't. You just want to sit on the fence because it's comfortable. People don't want to cut the cords with their toxic friends because that means there's less enjoyment for them. So it's all linked, it's all intermittent within Formula One. It's all a big old problem, and no one really is going to go out of their way to try and fix the problem because it's too big to moderate at this point, you know? It's ridiculous. But, you know, that's F1 for you. Oh man, this chat got a bit dark, didn't it? Man. Oh dear. Talking about toxic masculinity, social media, and sexual assault. Christ. You know, it's hard, but you gotta get around it. Anyway, keep the questions coming, gang. Feel free, you know. Seen the comments. Yeah, Hazel's my hero. Hazel's a star, and I adore her. Look, I'm in the same camp. I'm a huge Hazel fan. She is a tremendous journo, and I'll tell you for free, if you saw her thread last night that she put out about the race, she's the only person I've seen have the balls to even address that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then go out of your way to find it. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, it is what it is on that one. You know, it's just the world we live in today, unfortunately. Fact, our investigation found this account violated the Twitter rules of the most meaningless words on the internet. So true. Came here with a headache and a sleepy head. It's all gone now. I guess that's good. Good to know, Shivam. I'm magically healing people now. Who'd have thunk it? Who do you think will win the Indy title this year? I think Joseph Newgarden steals it at the end. Real talk, I think he's been bitterly unlucky for good chunks of the season, but I think at this point, I think Joseph Newgarden is the best all-round driver in the series. And he's been on fire since the 500. Like, he really should have had 2 other wins, like in Detroit and Road America. Those were races he should have won. Like, he was completely robbed at the end of those Grand Prix. Not so much in Detroit, he was kind of unlucky on strategy because of the way Dalton Kellett's car hung outside the pit lane in race 2 in Detroit. You know, if he got those extra laps under caution, he might have been able to hold off Pato O'Ward at the end of the race, but he still finished in second. But, like, races like Road America, his gearbox died. Brutal. And again, on the same side of the coin as Nick and Zoe point out, Alex Palou is now getting his rough end of the stick for a really good season because he's been taken out by Rinus VeeKay in Gateway, and he had to take an unlucky engine penalty during a test. He had to take another engine penalty going into Gateway. He might have to take another engine if that one's damaged. We'd have to wait and see. You know, if that one could, you might have to take another 6th place penalty next time out in Portland. We'll have to wait and see. But IndyCar's that sort of championship where one bad day can ruin your whole season. And for me, I think Newgarden is the best all-round driver in the series now, by a whisker over Scott Dixon. I think Newgarden will hold on overall. I think he'll climb the gap because Newgarden gets better as the season goes on, I find. You know, so I think Palou's got a great chance. I'd have no beef at all if Pato O'Ward won the title because Pato O'Ward is a superb talent. You know, he's a guy that deserves some good fortune in his racing career, given how his European path ended out. You know, I'd love to see IndyCar embrace him as another star. You know, a Mexican-American star. You know, something that I think would be a great pull for the entire series. And for McLaren as a brand. You know, so there's a lot to gain from a lot. Like Alex Palou, the fact he's even this good in his 2nd season in IndyCar is incredible. Like, the series is in very, very good hands. I think we are reaching that crossover point now where a lot of the upper 30-year-old stars are now starting to move on from the sport. I know IndyCar, you can race deep into your 40s. You know, it's the sort of series where you can drive into your 40s quite comfortably if you're good enough and you're motivated enough. But I think we're starting to reach that point where the younger 20s and the early 30s guys are starting to come through. Joseph Newgarden, Alex Rossi, Pato O'Ward, Rinus VeeKay, Colton Herta is a superb talent. And another guy who is going to probably be a future champion one day. I mean, Colton Herta was great in IndyCar from the moment he sat in a seat. And that is exactly the sort of young American style that the series has been dying for. I'm still only 21 years old. All the youngsters have won races this season, you know, so the series is in great hands going forward. It really, really is. And, you know, as the guys like Dixon and Power and Pagano, you know, Helio to an extent as they move on to pastures new, those guys will happily carry the backbone of this series, and I'm very glad that more and more people are starting to realise that IndyCar is a viable alternative. Like Romain Grosjean, as Marlene asks, saying objective thoughts on his Indy season. I think he's been very good. It's goddamn hard for a rookie to succeed in IndyCar. It's an incredibly hard series, no power steering, incredibly competitive. Virtually spec series, incredible talent, experience pays through in this series most of the time. So for Grosjean to hit the ground running, have a couple of podiums in his first season, and he's been a bit clumsy here and there, he's not been perfect by any stretch of the imagination. He's been clumsy on occasions. He's had a couple of questionable moments of racecraft, but I think overall, he's been outstanding as a driver. He's a guy that's only going to get better as time goes on, and it clearly is working because it's looking like he's going to go to Andretti next year to take Hunter Ray's seat. So, I think Grosjean is adapting very well to the series, and I think he's only going to get better, and he's still only in his mid-30s, so he's still got a few more years yet of him in his prime. So, I think he's been very good. Surely he's going to have to do the 500 next year now if he's going to a big-name team. Especially Andretti, who are 500 or bust at this point because they've not really been able to generate a true contender in the last couple of years now. So he's got to run all the ovals next year. I'm glad he got Gateway out of the way last week, and he seemed to enjoy it, and he drove pretty well for the most part. So he's got to take on the Indy 500 if he wants me to take him seriously as a title contender, because double points on that round, you have to have. It's going to be hard work for you to win a championship season if you don't have a good 500. So it's a very important part of the puzzle. And Grosjean will probably have to do that in order to be a serious contender, but I don't see any reason why he couldn't be. So yeah, I think he's been pretty good. Best race in IndyCar this year. Hey Tony, good to see you, man. What was the best race in IndyCar this year? Give me a minute. Let me pull up the Wikipedia list, just so I can remind myself of the race I enjoyed the most. I think I know what it is, but I just want to double check myself just in case. Give me a minute. Yeah, what did I enjoy on that list? It was a great 500 this year, generally speaking. That was a pretty good race. Detroit 2 was pretty good. Nashville was a wreck, but I can see how people might enjoy it. Mid-Ohio was a bit on the mess side, but maybe the 500 this year. Of all the races that I've watched this year, I thought Road America was alright as well. But yeah, I think probably the 500, I would say, I enjoyed the most. And honestly, that day, given we lost Jason Dupasquire that same day, Motorsport needed that Helio Castroneves win, and I stand by that to this day. I have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm just checking the chat real quick. Would like to see Grosjean do a Sato at the 500 one day. I think you very easily could. I like his aggression on the ovals more than anything else. I like it overall. Let me see here. Moving to the 500 this year. Here's one. Thoughts on the E1 series. Is it the next stepping stone towards real life Wipeout that I'm hoping for? What the heck's the E1 series? Hang on. Let me have a quick Google. Oh, that! Electric powerboats. Yeah. I guess. If you want to go down that sort of road. I guess it is quite close to powerboats, powerboats and the Wipeout series, I suppose. But yeah, if you've got any more questions coming in, guys, keep them coming. I think we'll do another half hour or so. So maybe until like 9:30 or something like that, if you want. That's better. They are very pretty, though, definitely. Can Lance win Spa if it rains? Sure, you'll probably wake up afterwards too. Will you get the IndyCar game when it comes out in 2023? Probably not, Nick. I don't really game all that much anymore. Like, my job is so, like, time-consuming sometimes that it's hard for me to sit down for a couple of hours and play a lot of video games these days. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but I barely touch my PS4. It's growing dust back there as we speak, but, we'll see how we go. If it's on PC, I might consider it. Yeah, Tony, I already spoke about the Ronaldo signing. You're going to have to check that out on replay. I'm not going to go down that road again. Forgive me. You missed it. Any British MotoGP predictions? Probably Fabio Quartararo. I know it sounds boring to suggest, but Yamaha have always gone well at Silverstone. It's a very smooth, flowing track where you can carry a lot of cornering speed through apexes, and that's where Yamaha's strength has always been. So yeah, for me, I think it's going to be Quartararo's to lose. Maybe if it gets into a bit of a power track sort of situation, maybe Francisco Bagnaia can get involved. Because I know the man is desperate for his first win in the top flight. But it's hard for me to bet against Fabio on this one. He came out in FP2, twisted his ankle, and got back on the bike 5 minutes later and then set a 1:59.3 and went 0.7 faster than anybody else. So Fabio is on fire right now, and he's riding with a level of confidence that I didn't know he had in him. So, it's I think he's the guy to beat this weekend. Hang on. Question from Katie. Take on the De Vries to Williams rumours that De Vries allegedly started himself. Did he really start those rumours? Wow. Bold. It's one of those. It's a bold strategy, Cotton, but let's see how this one checks out. I think that's what it sounds like to me. It wouldn't surprise me if he started. Like, the idea of a driver starting rumours is not surprising to me at all. Mostly because people talk, and if you're Nick De Vries and you want to be in Formula 1, how else is it going to start besides winning the Formula E title? I don't buy the rumours, personally. I don't think Williams have a good reason to bring him in besides he's good. Well, yeah, he's a good driver, but there's half a dozen of those that Williams could hire. Why is Nick de Vries better than all of those dudes? You know, like, you know, is de Vries better than someone like Nico Hulkenberg? I don't think so. You know, if Hulkenberg wanted to get the seat, you know, or Daniil Kvyat, for example, you know, or maybe Kevin Magnussen, who rejected Williams last year. Is he on that sort of level? I don't know. Like, it was alarming to me that Nick won the Formula 2 championship 2 years ago and not a single person even sniffed in his direction for a seat. And of course, because he didn't have the funding that Nicholas Latifi did, who was runner-up that year. You know, Sergio Sette Camara was up there that year and he ended up in Formula E, because it's an alternative. You know, if I'm Nick, I'd be sitting there saying, look, try and win another Formula E title next year, because Mercedes are going to be around for one more year. They're one of the better teams in Formula E, and see if the market opens up for you, because obviously we know Mercs are quitting at the end of next year. Do you really want to go to Williams and finish 15th every weekend? Like, is that your idea of fun? You know, it's going to be an interesting test, because I've said before, I think the market, like, doesn't take a lot of other motorsport series seriously. I don't see a lot of movement amongst the Formula 1 seats this year, because all the movement came last year. We saw the reshuffling of Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo and Sergio Perez and obviously Sebastian Vettel. So we already had a big reshuffle last year, which kind of means the following year tends to die out quite quickly. I said it on the website. I don't think anyone from Formula 2 is going to make it in next year. Like, I think the best bet for a Formula 2 graduate next year is Oscar Piastri, and I'm struggling to fit him in. Marlene, as soon as you put that comment, I talking about, as soon as you mentioned it, any of the F2 drivers move up. I don't think so. I think Oscar Piastri is probably the most talented guy in the field naturally. He's a little raw, but he's very, very quick. You know, I think of all the potential graduates in Formula 2, I think the one that's the most appealing to me is Oscar Piastri, with Guan Yu Zhou second. There might be some inherent value in Zhou because he's Chinese, and that's a big aspiring market for Formula 1. They want more Chinese influence. So that could be a good marketing move to put Guan Yu Zhou in the seat potentially, but who's taking him? Like, you look around him, you look at the situation when it comes to the driver market. Mercs are choosing between Bottas and Russell alongside Hamilton. Red Bull are keeping their two drivers. That's now confirmed with Perez's deal, which I know Ty Pete's a lot about. I'll get to that in a minute. Ferrari are going to keep their two. They'll take the second option on Carlos Sainz's contract. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do that. You know, McLaren, their two drivers are locked down for the next 2 years at least. I think he's on the same deal Norris now as Ricciardo, so I think they're both on 3-year contracts. You know, Aston Martin has Sebastian Vettel on multiple years, and Lance Stroll is going nowhere. Alpine's two drivers are confirmed for at least next year. AlphaTauri, they've got an option on Pierre Gasly's contract. They've got a 2-year option on Gasly's contract to keep him at AlphaTauri if Red Bull want to activate it. And again, don't see any reason why they wouldn't want to do that. Yuki Tsunoda is not going to get dumped after 1 year, I don't think. I think they're going to give him a bit more time because there's no one they can realistically replace him with, right? Because no Red Bull graduate in Formula 2 is looking that pretty besides maybe Liam Lawson. And I don't think Lawson is moving the needle like Tsunoda did last year. The other one is Alfa Romeo, and they've got Callum Ilott as a reserve driver. And Callum Ilott is good. You know, like Callum Ilott, they could plug into that seat tomorrow, I think, you know, if they really wanted to. And Frederick Vassar has full control over his two seats for the first time since coming back. Ferrari have said, we no longer control Alfa Romeo's first seat. So they could, if they wanted to, cut both Raikkonen and Giovinazzi if they want to. And they've got Callum Ilott as a reserve and Theo Pourchaire in the academy. I think Porsche is a bit too raw, but I think it's an option, you know? And then you've got Haas, who are not going to move on from Mick, and they're not going to move on from Mazepin, or Williams, who look like they're about to confirm Latifi for next year, and they can take their pick on the second driver because apparently they don't need the funding. So, they could take Piastri, but who else? You know? Are they going to go, you know, Latifi's money and then another young driver? They could do that, but then Piastri is a Renault Driver Academy prospect. So is Piastri willing to walk away? Is he willing to wait a year to see what happens at Alpine? Because Fernando Alonso confirmed he's going to be back next year alongside Ocon, who's on a 3-year extension. You know, so there's not a lot of viable options here. You know? So yeah, I think there's a very strong possibility that no one from F2 goes up next year. So, you know, at least that's my opinion anyway. I think there's going to be guys that are struggling on this one. Formula E was so incredibly close this year, and I'm still sad we were all of a proper on-track fight in race 15. Yeah, I mean, nature of Formula 2, like Formula E this season, they wanted carnage with their format, and they got it. You know, it doesn't make Nick de Vries any less worthy of his championship. However, I do have to raise an eyebrow that in a 450-point championship, the champion scored 99 points. Not a great look for anybody involved. It is time they move on from group qualifying and reverse grid splits. They are too big for a reverse championship order qualifying session now, in my opinion. They need to figure out another way of doing that, basically. Okay, you need to talk about your game tier list. Forza 3 over 2. I really... Look, I think they're both exceptional games. Forza's 2, 3, and 4 are the best games in that series for varied reasons. I preferred the extra detail and polish in the expansion that 3 brought to the table over 2. 2 was a bit more fun. I will say that much. I enjoyed 2 a little bit more. Over 3. I think 3 was just an overall just bigger, better, technically polished game. But I'm not going to blame anybody for thinking that Forza 2 was better than 3. Like, Forza 2 was an incredibly good game. Like, it was the first 360 game I ever played, believe it or not. I disagree. I love the format. Of course you do, Katie, because it provides chaos. People like chaos. I get it. It's motorsport. People like unpredictability and randomness. Formula E was a bit too random for my liking this year. Like, this is just my chaos theory. You can laugh me out of the room for this take. Feel free. A little bit of chaos makes the world go round. When your series becomes about the chaos, that's when you've got a problem. Because motorsport series are in a constant battle between sporting integrity and entertainment. You can't have one without the other, you know? You could have the most integral motorsport series in the world, but if no one's entertained by watching it, you're gonna die. Pardon me. But if you go too far the other way, and it becomes pure entertainment, people are not going to take you seriously as a racing series, or as a series in general. NASCAR has been dealing with that problem for years with its playoff format. Like, the playoff format is a mess in NASCAR, and people have hated on it for years and years because they got rid of the old Winston Cup scoreboard system, they brought in the chase format, and people hated it. And because NASCAR thought it was going to bring them more TV ratings, and it didn't do that. If anything, it's gone into decline since they brought in the chase format, and people don't like it. People think it's too contrived. And that's the battle that we have to face. Look, as a motorsport fan, I follow World Superbikes, for example, and them and the British Superbike seasons both brought in, like, change of formats. Like, World Superbikes brought in a Super Pole race to set the grid for race 2. Before that, they used to reverse the race 1 grid, so that whoever was in 4th place at the end of race 1 would start race 2 on pole. It was a reverse grid rule with the top 9 positions reversed, but then row 2 would become row 1. It was weird. So if you won the last race, you would start 9th. And then if you finished the last race in 4th, you would start 1st. And it didn't work because Jonathan Rea and Chaz Davies, who were the 2 best riders in the sport, just changed their riding styles. They would accept starting on the 3rd row in a superbike race off the line and then be ultra aggressive on the first lap, and they would just get back to the front anyway. It didn't have the desired effects, and then they brought in the Super Pole race to have 3 races over a weekend instead. BSB basically copied NASCAR's playoff format with the showdown, which was with 8 races to go, they would reset the championship and have the top 6 on 500 points, which was way above everybody else, and they would basically have their own 8-race playoff format to decide the championship. And it didn't work because dominant riders will still win. Like Leon Haslam and Josh Brooks won BSB titles that way by running the field over, because it didn't fucking matter what format you had. Winning is winning. Dominance is dominance. I went to BSB a few years ago, and Josh Brooks on the last race had already won the championship the day prior, because they did race 1 on the Saturday, races 2 and 3 were on the Sunday, and Josh Brooks already had the number 1 plate on his bike. So it kind of took the sting out of it because, you know, Brooks was already champion. You know, so you've got to juggle sport and integrity and the entertainment factor. You need a little bit of the show to keep things entertaining, but you also need to have integrity to have people take your championship seriously. And I think Formula E were drifting a bit too much towards the entertainment side of that last season. That's my opinion, you know. I say this as a person that likes Formula E and likes the sport overall, but it's season 8 and they still have problems. You know? Group qualifying wouldn't be as bad if drivers didn't impede each other, because we've seen them going to Super Bowl from Group 1 or Group 2 if they stop dicking around. They're going to dick around always, Katie, because if you're a racing driver and you're a racing team trying to set a fast lap in a limited time in group qualifying, you will leave it as late as you possibly dare, because the more rubber on the track, the better. So you will leave it as late as you dare. So that's why people impede each other, because you're trying to gain an advantage, as much as an advantage as you can. We saw that in Formula 1 with Hungary's qualifying with Perez and Hamilton. Did Hamilton back up Perez? Yeah, he probably did. But as Christian Horner quite rightly pointed out, Hamilton had right of way. He's entitled to do what he did. And if anything, Hamilton was a victim of the system because he was being backed up by Charles Leclerc in front of him. So, if you're going to... you have 12 minutes in Formula 1 in Q3 to set a qualifying time, right? They're always going to leave the best run till last because that's when the most amount of rubber is on track. If you're going to have a group qualifying format, that's an inevitable part of the sport because, as you said before, motorsport is all about gaining all the advantage where you can get it. You know, and that's not going to change anytime soon, as long as that format's still a thing, you know? So, there is no getting around that, unfortunately. If I specifically want chaos, I'll go to Hednesford Hills and watch the manga racing. Yeah, true. Harvick was robbed of a chase or playoff spot this last year. Yeah, he definitely was. Harvick was clearly the best guy in NASCAR last year, and I'm not even a big NASCAR fan, and I'll tell you that for free. Harvick was clearly the best guy in the sport that last year, and bad luck can completely can rob you of a playoff spot. That's the nature of playoff formats. They extrapolate and they make mistakes and bad days that much worse. That's the problem, you know? There's no getting around that, unfortunately. Same as you mentioned in the chat, Jeff, as well. Problem with Formula E is the tracks are too small for a system where track evolution doesn't massively screw people over. Yeah. A lot of these smaller street circuits, Formula E is going to inevitably outgrow. Because we've got the Gen 3 cars coming next year. You're talking about how these cars are going to be touching nearly 190, 200 miles an hour soon. And, you know, we're still racing in these inky-dinky street circuits where contact is almost inevitable. You know? Is it ironic that the best race we had in Formula E this season was Monaco? A proper Grand Prix level track? I'm not saying they have to race on Grand Prix circuits, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the one with the biggest track and the widest track, and that was Monaco most of the time, was the one that produced the best race. Like, they will eventually outgrow those street circuits, and that's going to be a problem. But, you know, we'll have to see how that goes. Again, guys, keep the questions coming. I'm gonna go till 1:30, so, keep them coming. We've got another about 15, just over 15 minutes or so. Valencia showed that going to GP circuits is not the solution. Not necessarily. Race 2 was fine. Race 1, I don't think the biggest problem wasn't, like, the track was a factor, but it was also I think the Valencia disaster was a lot of different elements coming together. Like, the track was definitely a problem, i.e. not enough places to get regen, you know, so that was going to be a problem. It was probably a bit too fast, a Grand Prix track on that level for Formula E. And if somebody parked it in a gravel trap, it was going to be an immediate safety car because you have to crane the car away because they can't get out of a gravel trap. So that's why we had 5 safety cars, 5 safety car kilowatt reductions as a result of that. And then, right at the end, we had Antonio Felix da Costa. He didn't back the wagon up enough to take a lap off the Grand Prix because he crossed the line with a green flag with about 20 seconds left in that race. So as a result, there was 2 laps left instead of 1 lap left, and then everybody was caught out by the kilowatt reduction, and the race was 1 lap too long all of a sudden. So I think it was a lot of different factors that caused the Valencia mess, not just the fact, oh, track bad. Because race 2 was fine. The guys adapted, and they made it work. So I don't necessarily think that Grand Prix tracks are also a problem here. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see how we go. I think it's viable, and I think Formula E could figure it out if they really wanted to. I just don't think they want to go down that road. But with the pandemic being the pandemic, they had to force themselves into doing things that were different. And, yeah, you know, I didn't like the XL Center at all. The XL Center was the definition of a bad racetrack that forced contact to pass people a lot of the time. I know that's a Formula E problem in the first place, but the fact that nobody factored in a safety car runoff, like Lucas di Grassi tried, and the fact that we had so many incidents of wheel banging didn't help either. Like, Jesus. So, you know. Like, of course street circuits can work for the series, and, you know, places like Quebec were good. Like, the series is more than good enough at this point to handle both of them. It's the matter of what direction the series wants to go in, you know? That's how it's going to be, in my opinion. Oh, wow. Birmingham 53 for 5 in the blast. Yikes. Oh, and with the way they're stepping away from the eco-friendliness of the whole NFT shit, they can easily go to using more tyres now, etc., etc. Yeah. Look, I'll keep it brief on that front. Like, I'm not going to get sore about it because what's the point? Motorsport is not going to turn itself away with easy money. Even if it's a lot like what's happening with sealed video games and how the coin crisis was in the 80s, where everybody was, like, pumping up a market where the bubble will eventually burst. Formula 1 has got massive crypto influence now. 2 F1 teams have it on their cars. Aston Martin and McLaren. The series itself, the sprint races are... backed by Crypto.com. And the new Overtake Award they just came out with for the end of the season is now sponsored by Crypto.com. MotoGP has... like, MotoGP's last race in Austria was backed by a cryptocurrency website. Bitkey.com, I think it was. You know, they are taking Bitcoin sponsorship money. They had an NFT sale via trading cards and collectibles only about a month ago. While also having an electric-based series, the Moto E World Cup, is a part of the support calendar for MotoGP. So, MotoGP has been completely hypocritical about this. Formula 1, you know, has been completely hypocritical about how the environment is part of We Racers 1 now, as part of its manifesto, and they want to ditch single-use plastics, and they want to be carbon neutral by 2030, yet they endorse a form of farming imaginary money that takes up the electrical demand of a medium-sized European country. Like, IndyCar has dabbled in this, as Zoe's pointed out now. Banner Awards sold an NFT not long ago. More and more football clubs are selling NFTs. You know, Formula E, you know, again, is the latest one now that's doing an NFT auction over Ethereum. So, motorsport is not above taking the easy money, unfortunately. And, you know, I don't endorse it. I think it's bullshit, and I think it's kids trading funny money thinking they're going to get rich by killing the planet, and I think it's largely bullshit. But motorsport will take that easy money because they're not going to get easy money from anywhere else. Any other facet of life. We're a niche sport. You know, we are a niche sport. We're not as popular as the big players. Even Formula 1, on a sporting scale, relatively speaking, is a niche sport compared to the big players out there. You know, so they will take the easy money where they can get it. And yeah, it's complete and utter hypocrisy. But I've always said to people before, motorsport is one of the few sports that could happily exist without fans being in attendance. And I got that one from Rebecca Jones, who works in PR, is a good friend of mine. She said to me, first and foremost, well, Dre, like, I've worked in motorsport PR for 10 plus years. Like, I'll tell you for free, motorsport is like one of the very few sports out there where you could happily do it without fans, and people would still do it because people still want to race fast cars, especially men. So yeah, it's complete hypocrisy from most motorsport series, and I find it quite laughable that we're even going down this road. But people will go down this road because when it comes to these big bubbles with things like cryptocurrency, in the same way as what happened with trading cards earlier this year, with sealed video games we've been going through right now. If anyone's been doing their digging on the copy of Super Mario Bros. That went for $2 million because it was sealed by a company that was basically padding the money into the industry, market manipulation, basically. It's the same way as that. It's the same way as how trading cards have exploded in the last year or so due to the pandemic and due to the fact that people are now trying to bump the market up. And like what we saw with collectible coins in the 80s. Early investors want to jump in and then bump it up by talking about how great it is, and hopefully they can get people to jump on the wagon. And motorsport is no different. They're going to jump on the NFT wagon, and when the bubble bursts about how much people think this shit is worth, and they'll all hop straight back off it again. Trust me. It will happen eventually in the end. Like, you know, that's how motorsport works, I'm afraid. We're not above cheap money, and sometimes the guys in motorsport need the cheap money. But it is what it is. But yeah, we've got about 10 minutes left, gang, so keep the questions coming. I'll try and go a bit quicker, a bit rapid fire for the last 10 minutes. We still have 19 of you watching it. We've been about 25 most of the way through, so thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. I'm very, very grateful. But keep them coming, gang. Keep them coming. Got just over 7 or so minutes to go. Yeah, Lego is the same. I was looking at a 12-year-old set that cost 10 quid, and they're going for 80 after a huge jump in price in 2019-20. Yeah, not surprised at all. Collectors and scalpers are all over the place now in these markets. Not surprised at all. Like, Pokemon cards exploded in the last year or so. It didn't help when Jake Paul was spending 7 figures on buying up original unboxed starter set packs. Because, like, the box of 24 unopened starter set Pokemon cards, base set, the very first set with the infamous Charizard in it, they were getting snapped up at $300,000 each. And I thought that was ridiculous. Like, and of course, when people knew that Jake Paul was going out of his way to buy them, I don't know if it was Jake or Logan, I think it was Logan actually, but who fucking cares? They're both twats anyway. Like, of course that bumped up the value for everybody else, and all of a sudden these grading companies can't deal with all the cards that are being sent in because the grading is what makes them more valuable. People fighting in Walmarts to get packets of Pokemon and Pokemon cards and baseball cards to the point where most suppliers like Target and Walmart are no longer going to stock them, or putting them in those protective cases like you do when you buy cigarettes and condoms. Like, baffling what this pandemic's done to people, man. Um, I've tried my hand at crypto trading. It's only going up incrementally. Good for you, man. Like, Nick, if it's gonna make you money, make your money. But you know, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that, you know, it's not my thing per se. Who will be third in the World Constructors Championship? I think Valtteri. I know it's a really, really boring answer. Like, I think Mercedes are back in the lead of the title race now that we know it's almost certain that the Red Bull will take at least one set of engine penalties at some point over the rest of the season. And I know somebody asked me about Sergio Perez, and I'm just like, I didn't really care that he got re-signed. I say that because there was no other option for Red Bull. Who were they going to bring in that was on Checo's level? Look, Checo was most definitely an upgrade on Alex Albon, don't get me wrong, right? But like, there was no better option available for them. The only guy that might have been better was Pierre Gasly, and Gasly is not for sale on that market. Not like that, because that would involve Dr. Marco admitting that he was wrong about something. And there's about the same odds of me marrying Rihanna as that happening. So, no. Like, Checo is a good driver, but he's not been particularly great in that Red Bull this year. Like, I'll put it to you this way. We've roasted Valtteri Bottas over the coals for years. People were calling for his sacking 2 years ago, right? And I think the big problem with that was that, and the problem I had with that was always that people wanted Valtteri Bottas to be Nico Rosberg 2.0. They wanted an internal title threat between Hamilton and Rosberg, but we'd never got that because Valtteri was never on Rosberg's level. And part of the problem with that, and I've said this before in previous Hangouts, is because we didn't take Nico Rosberg seriously till he won that title. So we didn't take Rosberg seriously until he retired. And then when Valtteri Bottas came along, we were all sat down and realised, oh my god, Nico Rosberg was actually really fucking good. And Bottas is not on Hamilton's level. That's pretty obvious at this point that he's not on Hamilton's level. But he was at worst, decent number 2. Like, and the problem now is that Mercedes need more out of Valtteri because Red Bull is a genuine threat for the first time. Like, Ferrari were kind of a threat, but Valtteri was a better driver during the Ferrari era. When Ferrari had Vettel and then Leclerc challenging, Bottas was a bit better compared to what he is now in comparison to the field where Bottas has got fundamental problems as a racing driver. Like, where it's like he struggles to gain ground in bad races, even if his car is stronger. He's a good defensive driver and he's a good front runner, but he's not a guy that you would pin on to make a comeback. And in the sport now where it's Hamilton versus Verstappen, Bottas is the clear number 3 guy in the field. And third's not enough. For Bottas, third place is par. Like, he's not hitting a birdie until he's finishing second or first, and he's not done that this year. So now, all the pressure is on Bottas because he has to at least beat Perez. And the funny thing about it all is despite the fact that we've destroyed Bottas for his worst days, like in Baku, where he had that awful day and didn't score any points at all. You know, or Imola, where he was hit by Russell, but he was running, I think, 9th at the time. Right? Sergio Perez has not been any better in an arguably better car. But we give Perez a bit of a bigger leash because it's his first year in a top team. Well, at least in this era. This is his first year of a big team, and I think he's more popular than Valtteri Bottas. We like Perez more. You know, he's as a upstart, you know, the midfield grafter. When he got his big seat, we were like, yeah, go Checo, he's earned it. Especially given that he, you know, was rammed out of the door at Racing Point thanks to Sebastian Vettel. We all felt a bit bad for Checo. And up until Sakir, when he finally won a Grand Prix, we thought there was a reasonable chance he might not make it back to F1. So, you know, I'd argue the secondary drivers are a very important factor in this title race. And because if Bottas keeps beating Checo, it puts more pressure on Verstappen to win the individual driver's title over Hamilton. Because, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret here, right? Formula One teams don't really care about the Drivers' Championship. Don't tell anyone. Because the money's in the Constructors. The money's in the Constructors' Championship. Like, that's where the prize money goes. That's what keeps the bills being paid. Like, the Drivers' Championship is a bonus prize. The Constructors is the one that really matters. And, you know, when that's factored in, it means that Bottas's role in the context of Mercedes is more important, because you expect Hamilton to be around the 400-point mark and he'll probably win 8-9 races a year or whatever, right? He needs Bottas to back him up a bit more, because Red Bull is more of a threat now. They've got a stronger car. Verstappen is having his best season in Formula 1, in my opinion, right? And Sergio Perez is way better than Alex Albon is. So you add all of those factors up, and the battle for third might actually be even more important than the battle for the championship. The problem is that we as fans don't really care about the teams. We care a lot more about the drivers. We are so much more emotionally invested in the drivers, especially in this day and age. You look on Twitter, for example, how many usernames put the initials of their favourite drivers in their bios? MV33, Team LH, LH44, you know, CL16, PG10, SV5, etc, etc. I guarantee you, if you pulled out 1,000 accounts on Twitter that were F1 fans at random, you would get way more that would have drivers' initials in their bios, more so than they would have teams in their bios. Unless you're McLaren, in which case, McLaren is just the army of simps. Yeah, you didn't hear me say that. But, for the most part, I think that's how most fans are on Twitter. We are not as emotionally invested in teams than we are drivers. And, which is funny, because when it comes to how these teams function, it's actually the other way around. Like, the Constructors' Championship is integral to how an F1 team functions. That's where all the prize money is. The drivers doesn't really count for anything besides pride and Wikipedia entries. So, you know, I think Mercs are in a bit of a stronger situation. I've said it before. I think Bottas is nowhere near as bad as some of the internet pretends that he is, in my humble opinion. And alongside that, I think a lot of Perez's shortcomings this season has been glossed over, because he's the sexy pick in that Red Bull team. I don't think Bottas is anything special, but if they said tomorrow that Valtteri Bottas keeps his seat over George Russell, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like, I'd have zero issue with it right here and now if Merckx kept him over Russell. I'll say that on the record. Like, Bottas is a known quantity. He's not a great one, but I think he's a good one. And, like, that in itself makes him inherently less risky in a teams-based title compared to George Russell. And don't get me wrong, I think Russell is a great talent, but I think he needs a stepping stone before we start talking about him in a Mercedes. Like, George Russell's sample size of reasons why he deserves a championship level seat is one race where his future teammate did not take part. How can people sit there and tell me that Valtteri Bottas sucks, but then George Russell deserves a F1 seat in the best seat in motorsport because he beat someone that you think is shit? Doesn't make any sense to me. Like, Bottas is not the yardstick for how good Mercedes can be. It's blatantly Hamilton, because Hamilton has led the charge in that Mercedes for, what, 6 of the 7 years they've been together? Like, and we've seen better Mercedes drivers in the second seat compared to Valtteri. Like, and that was obviously Nico Rosberg. So, like, when you weigh it up like that, I would rather keep Valtteri over Russell, because Russell's career is one big old question mark to me. You know? But you're right, Mason. You're completely right. The stepping stone is not there, and that's a big part of the problem, and that's Merckx's problem. Merckx's problem is that they've not been able to instill enough influence within the sport to either run a second team or have enough influence where it can put its drivers in a placeholder seat better than Manor. Because they tried it with Ocon. Like, but Ocon, the best they could do for Ocon was Manor. And then when he got cut from Racing Point for Lance Stroll, like, Toto Wolff huffed and he puffed, trying to get Ocon a better seat, but he couldn't do it. No one was willing to take Ocon on, and apparently he called the grid a bunch of cowards for not taking Esteban Ocon on. Well, no, because teams want to produce their own stars rather than borrow one off somebody else, where if they're good, they're just going to lose them anyway so they can put him in the big boy seats. It's not as simple as, just dump him in a B-team car. It's fine. This is the problem that Mercs have had. Their academy has been largely ineffective. You know, they had Pascal Wehrlein. I think would have been at least a solid midfield driver if he'd been given an actual seat worth a damn. Like, Wehrlein didn't do a damn thing to lose his job, besides not have enough funding. Like, I remember Manisha Kelton-Bourne gassed Wehrlein up to the heavens about how good a talent he was, but had to let him go because Marcus Ericsson was providing the funding. Could have got on the Williams seat. You know, could have got on the Merck seat when Rosberg retired, but they chose Valtteri because Valtteri was a safer bet, which is understandable because he was driving well for Williams back then. You know? And yeah, Mason, you're spot on. Like, it's the problem that Red Bull now have with Alex Albon. They're trying to get him back in F1 for next year, but who's going to take him? You didn't think he was good enough for either one of your teams. So why would somebody else take that gamble? Like, you deemed Alex Albon not good enough for your factory seat after a year and a half. Rightly or wrongly. Probably rightly, but even so, you deemed Alex Albon not good enough for your main car, and then not good enough for your second car either because you wanted to promote Yuki Tsunoda and thought he was too good a prospect to ignore. So, if you don't think Albon's good enough for your main car, and you don't think Albon's good enough for your secondary car, why would somebody else hire him? Like, Why do you want someone else to take the risk? Because you don't think Albon's good enough. That's obvious. JCR asking, do you think Ocon would have been a genuine contender if he had not signed the new contract? No. Like, they were never going to hire Ocon. Instead, like, they've been infatuated with Russell for the last year, but it's like, I don't think, the longer this goes on, the less likely I think Russell will actually get this seat. I don't think Toto wants to say who's getting the seat next year in case it does a number on his title campaign he's in right now. I don't think he wants to alienate Bottas, which is understandable because he's got bigger fish to fry right now. You'd think Bottas would be motivated because he'd be a free agent at the end of the season and he's in the shop window. But again, there's no real driver market this year, and no one is bending over backwards for Valtteri Bottas. Like, if Bottas gets cut tomorrow, what's the best seat on the table for him? Alfa? You've gone from the championship level car to the team that's 9th in the championship right now. It's a brutal move. Because the other teams are not going to... Again, we talked about it earlier. A lot of the midfield is already set for next year. The viable moves are not really there. Like, again, Aston Martin are pretty much locked in. Alpine are locked in. You know, Ferrari are locked in. You know, McLaren are locked in. AlphaTauri are probably locked in. You know, it's not a fair fight, but unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it. It's a hard break, but like I said, I'd have zero issue if Merckx kept Bottas on for next year, because I think the Russell situation is a massive gamble, and you know what's going to happen? Hamilton's going to beat George Russell repeatedly, at least for the first year. Unless Russell is a real super prospect, like on Verstappen's level. And I'm not entirely convinced that George is, right? But say Hamilton smacks him around next year, if Russell gets the seat. We're going to start talking. We're going to start turning on him. We're going to say, is Russell good enough for a seat of this level? Did they gamble too hard on putting him up the field too soon? Because we in F1 love a narrative. We Brits, when it comes to sport, we love to build dudes up, only to chop them down again when they get a bit too big for their proverbials. We did it with Hamilton in Formula 1. We do it with a lot of sporting stars. We're doing it right now with Lando Norris. Like, I guarantee you, if Norris ever gets to a championship level seat, and he fucks up somewhere on social media or something, we're going to dunk on him. We did it enough last week for the Mexican outfit. Like, if someone's too popular, we look for shit to chop them down with. You know. Another example, Ben Stokes in cricket. Like, Ben Stokes, you know, was the next big thing. Then he, quite rightly, punched out an abusive couple towards a homophobic dickhead that was abusing a gay couple outside the nightclub and knocked him out, and he was vilified for it. We wanted to chop him down again so that we could build him up when he won us the World Cup and then had that ashes in it. You know? So, I guarantee you, if George Russell is not a 300-point-a-season driver, if he gets the Merckx seat next year, especially with how aggressive the Hamilton fan base is, they love to keep talking about how much of the GOAT he is, and that Michael Schumacher rattles the shit out of a lot of Hamilton fans, right? If Hamilton smacks Russell around next year, they're going to start chopping his ass down too. It's just how we treat people when it comes to British sport. Trust me. Yeah, I can't blame any of you guys for thinking that, yeah, Tsunoda over Albon might have been a Honda handshake agreement. You know, hey, You promote a Japanese guy into the sport, we'll help you. We'll help you with the IP because they've bought their power units out. You know, I get it. And yeah, and as Mason points out, the sink and swim is cutthroat. It's cutthroat, right? Because we've been spoilt. We've had a massive upswing in young drivers in the last 5 years. Look at the situation. Look at how the sport has changed in the last half decade. Max Verstappen could very easily win a championship this year. He's already got over 100 races under his belt, and he's still only 23 years old, right? He was a punt by Red Bull Racing, and this is not an insult to Max, right? He did 1 year in single-seaters and wasn't even the best in European Formula 3 because he was beaten by Esteban Ocon. Didn't fucking matter. Went to F1, was good immediately. Ended up being great very quickly, right? He has been arguably the best of the Red Bull prospects that have come through. I think he had more natural talent in his age 19, age 20 season than Sebastian Vettel did. And Vettel would go on to win 4 titles before he turned 28. Verstappen is a super prospect. Charles Leclerc is a super prospect. Flew up the junior classes. Like Formula 3, Formula 2, one first time of asking. Went to Sauber, was excellent at Sauber. Got a Ferrari seat in his second year over Kimi Raikkonen. And there was a viable argument to keep Raikkonen on. Raikkonen had just had one of his best seasons in Formula 1 in 2018. That was genuinely... Kimi got better and better at Ferrari as time went on. Like, there was still a very real case you could have said to Charles, give it another year. Leclerc has been superb in F1 whilst he's driving for Ferrari. He's still a bit rough, right? But he's an incredible driver. Top 5 in the world, comfortably, right? He's a bit of a late bloomer, but Lando Norris is now becoming a talent on that level. Lando Norris is 22 years old. Like, this is his 3rd season, and he's probably going to end up being driver of the year if he keeps this up. He's beating 2 dudes in far better machinery than he's in. Like, year 1 he struggled a little bit. Year 2 he was trading blows with Carlos Sainz, who's another superb midfielder who's having a great season at Ferrari right now. I think Carlos Sainz has also been very impressive in his own right. Numerous good comeback drives and whatnot, right? Norris is 3rd in the championship right now, remarkably consistent, has barely put a foot wrong all year long, and it's just generally been excellent, and 9 out of 11 races this season he's finished in the top 5. Norris has been superb. This was meant to be the hard year for Norris now that he's got Daniel Ricciardo as a teammate. Ricciardo, who was a top 5 driver in the sport going into this season, right? Ricciardo's been smoked. Ricciardo's been spanked so far this season. Norris, like, is a superb talent. Yeah, he's 21. He's not 22 until November, I don't think. So yeah, he's 21, Lando Norris. Year 3 and a superb driver, right? A guy that is now knocking on the door of being world class. Pierre Gasly is like the 4th ranked younger prospect in Formula 1. Maybe 5th, depending on how highly you evaluate George Russell. And Pierre Gasly has won a Grand Prix. Pierre Gasly's won a Grand Prix and had multiple podiums in an Alfa Tauri. He's the 4th highly rated prospect. Maybe 5th, if you think Russell really is the future. Do you know how terrifying that is? As an almost direct result of all of this, I think how we evaluate rookies has changed now to the point where... Well, let's put it to you this way. Alex Albon was a 2-and-done driver. And I don't care what you tell me, like, Red Bull ruined Alex Albon's career. They called him up too soon, they chucked him into the deep end and thought, fuck it, compete with Max Verstappen. Couldn't do that, and then was cut for the trouble. In his first and second seasons in Formula 1, when really Albon was more on Kvyat's level. So they thought, let's thrust him into the big time and see what we've got, comparing him to Verstappen. And Verstappen, as I said, Verstappen might be the best driver in the world pound for pound at the moment. Like, what did Red Bull think was going to happen? Alex Albon, who was a Formula 2 championship runner-up, in that same ballpark as Russell and Norris, in and out of Formula 1 in 2 years, and there's no easy way back for him. That level of, like, Alex Albon 10 years ago would probably be an insane talent. Alex Albon now is out of the sport in 2 years. And it's because these new drivers that are coming through are more talented than ever, and teams are going to want to keep them and see if they develop into greater talent. The talent ends up eating itself. That's why I talked about it with Formula 2 last year, where Ferrari had 3 genuine prospects for Formula 1 next year, or for what would now be this year. And there wasn't enough seats to go around. You had Eilert, Schwartzman, and Mick Schumacher. Only one of them got an F1 seat. Schwartzman's now probably missed his window because I don't think he's good enough this season right now to really bang on the door. And Eilert ended up as a test driver. And they still had Christian Lundgaard, Guan Yu Zhou. Dan Tickton wasn't bad last year. Had a win taken away from him. He's better this year, you know? This is the standard now. People are saying that, oh, you know, make the super licenses harder to get. I say, it doesn't matter how hard you make the super license to get. The talent is destroying itself. There's too much of it and there's not enough seats to go around. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, Lawson and Hauger seem like reasonable talents, but, well, yeah, Lawson and Hauger are good drivers, but Hauger's going to be at least another year. At least another year. Probably 2. Especially given Formula 2's format sucks at the moment. 2 reverse grid races? On the shitty tracks on the calendar? Fuck that. They need to go back to the way it was in 2019. The 3-race format is shit. Don't get me wrong, Callum Eilert is more than good enough to be a sports car guy, as you mentioned, Mason, you know. But he's good enough to be in Formula 1, in my opinion. I think he was up there with Mick Schumacher and Yuki Tsunoda, and the other 2 got chances in F1, and Eilert just missed out. You know, Eilert beat Tsunoda in the Formula 2 Championship last year, but Eilert had literally no money left. Because, again, Formula 2 eats itself because you need 2 to 3 million quid a year just to compete. God. Just got a dirty mark on my wall. So when the sport is now getting younger than ever and more talented than ever, and I think the median age of drivers in the field is now, I think, 26. Like, it's going to be harder and harder anyway for talent to impress, because you're now competing with Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Russell, and Gasly. A quarter of the grid are guys that have either won Grand Prix or had elite level opportunities and chances to win Grand Prix, all before the end of their 3rd season. Max Verstappen was driving an elite car in year 2. Charles Leclerc was driving an elite car in year 2. Lando Norris is now in a top 3 car in year 3, and arguably had a car that was capable of finishing on the podium in year 2. Pierre Gasly had a shot at Red Bull in year 3, I think it was. You know? This is unprecedented opportunities for younger drivers. And it's going to destroy itself because we're now expecting every Formula 2 graduate to be on Verstappen's level. And that's just not sustainable. You're just going to end up destroying each other. Like, the yardstick is just inherently unfair. Like, they've tried to narrow the window by putting a minimum 18 limit in there and trying to mitigate the amount of series carry super license points. And I know there is talk that people want to make the super license even harder to get. So guys like Nikita Mazepin don't make it, which is understandable. But the difficulty getting in is not the problem. The problem is there's not enough seats to go around. Yeah, Richard Verschoor's on a race-by-race rolling contract because there's no guarantee you can get the funding. How do you curb the cost to entry? Like, Mason, you're spot on. Again, like, you know, like, it's €1 million to do a season of Formula 3 now. The third stage on the ladder. Formula 2 is now 2 to 2.5 a season. And if you're not well funded after that, you're not getting an F1 seat. You ain't got a prayer. You can't, and the problem is you can't stick around in Formula 2 for years and years and make a career off yourself because you're just burning money. You're hemorrhaging cash. Year on year on year, you can't really do that long term. So ultimately, you're just sort of boned in that sense. Like, the cost to entry is going to be the biggest hurdle for junior racing going forward. And then F1 is in such a talent bottleneck right now. Like, whose seats are you taking? Like I said, you need to be better than Alex Albon. And Alex Albon was really good going into F1. Yeah. Zoe quite rightly points out, it's exactly why Christian Lundgaard was taking part in IndyCar a couple of weeks ago at Indianapolis, because he's a Renault Academy driver. Renault have locked their driver lineup down for at least another year and a half. Like, at least until 2023. And Ocon is guaranteed now until 2025. So, with Ocon with 3 years on from his contract to get to, and then Alonso, who is still more than good enough to race at this level at age 40 even, going into his age 41 season. I don't blame Lundgaard for going over there because, like, where else is he going to drive? There's no room at the inn at Renault, and there's no indication that they're going to try and buy a seat for somebody else. Like, and that is an academy that's got Christian Lundgaard, Guan Yu Zhou, and Oscar Piastri in it. It's an incredible fleet of talent. Lundgaard's a superb driver. He's been very unlucky in the ART this year. Lundgaard's a great driver. Guan Yu Zhou is, I think, leading the Formula 2 championship right now. I don't think he's any lower than second. You know, but again, he's a year 3 guy, so people will already look at him like damaged stock because he's in his 3rd season in Formula 2. You know, and then Piastri, who is really good, you know, but is probably going to have to win the championship to really, you know, get teams looking. And as Zoe says, that's why Rinus VeeKay ended up in the United States, because his family knew straight away the European ladder was too expensive. The European ladder, again, you basically now know you need to be spending at least £4 million to get to Formula 1. And that's if you're good enough to go through classes year on year. The majority of drivers aren't good enough to do that. Like, as it stands right now, the most recent guy that jumped up the classes that quickly was Yuki. And, yeah, right now, like, Yuki's not looking too hot at the moment, unfortunately. It's a problem. It's a problem. And there's no easy solution, because if you want to reduce the cost to entry, the FIA is going to have to spend an awful lot of money. And that's not possible right now. So yeah, you know, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to say this because I want all the young talent to get their flowers and to get their shine, but one, it's a sport. That's just not going to happen sometimes. It's not a fair fight, and as you're quite right to mention, Marlene. And do you really want to win the championship if you know there's no place this year? Yeah. It might be the champions rule in Formula 2 might make it a poison chalice. If Piastri wins the title and doesn't get a seat, he can't go back to Formula 2 and race again and maybe increase his stock. He's stuck. He's in limbo. Does he go off to Japan and drive in Super Formula instead, or go to IndyCar, or try Indy Lights instead for a year? I don't know. Right, or go into sports cars at least? Again, it's all over the place. And again, there's no easy solution. And it's the double-edged sword of... Yeah, it's the double-edged sword of motorsport, and, you know, we love the talent. You know, so... It sucks, but it is what it is. My God, I went an extra half an hour. I said I was going to stop at 9:30. It's now 10 o'clock. I just kept going. And you guys all stuck around, which was great. Thanks, I guess. I think it's probably for the best I wrap it up. But, you know. Just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone that's tuned in. I do really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. I promise I'll get through the questions a bit quicker next time. And again, I say this every time, but I promise I will do another one of these in September at some point. I do enjoy doing them. You guys seem to really enjoy them when I do them. So I will... No, Mason, do not apologise. Like, this is me. I talk too much. I talk too much, but you know, I'm glad that people seem to appreciate that I talk and apply some nuance to discussions on sport and anything else in life. And I do really appreciate you guys sticking around, and you guys seem to really enjoy it, and I enjoy doing them, so there's no reason why I can't do them more often, so I will definitely try my best to do that. Episode 319 of Motorsport 101 is due up hopefully early next week at the latest. We talked about Le Mans, we talked about IndyCar as well in Gateway, so you can check that out as well. Episode 318 is up right now. Stick around on the YouTube if you want to hear more of us. You can do that right now. Binderdash is up right now. One of the most incredible MotoGP finishes ever seen. If you have not seen that finish, by the way, MotoGP put up the final 4 laps of that Grand Prix on its YouTube channel for free. Go watch it. It's like a Top Gear finish to a marathon race, but with bikes. It's really worth a watch. We talk all about that, the fallout of the Maverick Viñales saga, and a whole bunch more in there. I think Formula E season finale in there as well, and obviously now Nick de Vries won the title and all of that in there. So check that out if you haven't already. If you're not following me on social media, you can at Harrison101HD on Twitter. I'm on Instagram at Harrison101 as well, so you can check me out on there if you want. So yeah, follow me on there if you haven't already. Thank you again so much for your time, for your company. I do really appreciate it. It's a pleasure doing these, and I hope you guys enjoy them. Take care, gang, and I hope to see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your weekends, and yeah, enjoy the Grand Prix this weekend. Hopefully, it'll be a good one. That and the MotoGP as well at Silverstone. Two very good races on paper. Oh, by the way, just before I go, MotoGP race is free to air in the UK this weekend. It's on ITV1 at 1:30 PM. If you have not watched MotoGP before, go out of your way to watch it in the UK if you haven't already. For me, MotoGP is the best series in the world. It's free to air on ITV1 this weekend. Please watch it, support it. The sport being behind a £25 a month paywall is fucking stupid. It's far too expensive for what it is. Support it. Tell ITV that it's worth investing in, because if it can, it'll be a great grow for the sport in general, because it's far better than just a couple of 100,000 people watching it on BT Sport. Right, I've been Dre Harrison. Thank you very much for watching, and